The niyyah again becomes not just the essence of what we are, but the essence of this transaction that exists between the slave and his creator. Allah looks at our intentions. That's what we really are. And this again comes from those tasawwuf traditions which are rooted in these elemental concerns of the early Muslims, with an enormous bouquet of ethical outcomes, such as don't rush to judge. Evidently, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at why we do things more than at what we do, then we also should recognize that we may not be able fully to understand the apparent sinful behavior of others. And we may not be able to take pride in our own righteous actions because who knows what we really intend. So there's vast and rich ethical consequences that flow from this shift of the focus from the outward to the inward, which is what the Salaf are urging. And here again, وقال بعض السلف رب عمل صغير تعظمه النية رب عمل كبير تصغره النية. This appears in many of the earliest collections of sayings of the Salaf, including an important great book called the Kitab al-Zuhd of Ibn al-Mubarak. And what it means is many a small action is made enormous through intention. And maybe a great action is made small through intention. So again, religion turns into not just this kind of slot machine idea of I'll put in my 5 daily prayers and I'll get out bars of chocolate in the akhirah, the kind of mentality that, for instance, people like the Mu'tazila, with their very works-based understanding of the divine human transaction, seem to be tempted by. But it's moving towards something that is, in essence, exclusively interior. The outward actions are the necessary frame for which we have the intentions. If you don't have actions, you can't have an intention. But it's the intention that is the locus of the divine regard and is the basis of the significance of an act. So one tiny little prayer that you may pay no attention to and the world never notices, because of a certain gift that Allah gives you during that prayer, it becomes an open prayer, prayer in which the heart is truly in a state of awe and humility and love in the presence of the divine, can be the best thing that you ever do. And similarly, your 4th Hajj, when you said, well, it was a really good Hajj and I got it right this time and I might come again next year and it was really great and I got all of those little rules done this time, might not be worth anything at all, because your niyyah was all over the place. And this is something that any reflective believer is aware of, which is why, for instance, in Imam Nawawi's commentary on the hadith in Sahih Muslim, اتقوا السبع الموبقات, beware of the 7 deadly sins, he launches a long and very erudite disquisition as to what are the 7 deadly sins. And how many kaba'ir are there? How many mortal sins are there? And what's the difference between a mortal sin and a minor sin? And as a lawyer, of course, he wants to know these things. But he eventually leads us to the Ghazalian understanding, which is that it's really something that outwardly cannot be measured because a sin is in proportion to what we meant by that sin. It's very important in the context of those who sometimes become legalistic about matters, to remember that what we really are is not our outward form, which is made of flesh, which is not intrinsically valuable and won't last very long, and as years go by always degenerates. But what's really significant about us is this inner mystery, consciousness, intention, the desire to transcend. وقال الثوري, this is Sufyan al-Thawri, one of the great zuhad of the Salaf. كانوا يتعلمون النية للعمل كما يتعلم العمل. They used to learn intention for acts as they used to learn the act themselves. What does he mean by this? He means those who were before him, the Tabi'in and the Sahaba, just as they would learn actions, So also they would learn about the science of intention, how to rectify the intention, and how not to turn one's intention into just another outward act. To say, I intend to pray 4 rakahs of Zuhr, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can become just another formulaic thing because the heart is not present. So for the Salaf, the interior turn towards what's inward, towards the batin, towards meaning, which is the essence of the Ghazalian approach, is essential. The move from the outward to the inward, not to renounce the outward, but to give the outward its full meaning and glory. وقال بعض العلماء اطلب النية للعمل قبل العمل وما دمت تنوي الخير فأنت بخير. Seek out the intention for the action before you seek the action itself. And for as long as you intend what is good, you are in a state of goodness. Which again is good religious psychology. Whenever you're in a situation in which there is choices of ethical significance, which is almost all of our lives, if you enter that situation with the intention of finding things to do which are positive, then you will be a positive human being, and your entire relationality to others is going to follow suit, and you'll be a beloved person, even if in practice you're not serving them particularly copiously. Similarly, if you go into a situation on the basis of a certain inner suspiciousness, and you think of all of the things that you might be doing in relationship to these people, but without having the intention of khair, of being benign and helping them, then you'll be a force of negativity. Now, this is one of the subtler things about relationship between believers in their jama'at, in their communities, that to the extent that there is a catalytic minority of people whose intentions are really good, that tends to shape the intentions of the others, and vice versa. And those who are in charge of spiritual direction are very well aware of this. We'll do just one more. وقال عيسى عليه السلام طوبى لعين نامت ولا تهم بمعصية وانتبهت إلى غير إثم. Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam says, blessed is an eye that sleeps without thinking about sin, because it will wake without a disposition to sin. So again, this is about the issue of inner discipline, inner directedness, to have an irada for khair, here being the specific case of going to sleep with positive intentions, waking up without a disposition for sinfulness. That's the end of this morning's session, inshallah, and we'll be continuing right after Salat al-Zuhr. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Can I just let you know that there are some copies of some traditional qasa'id common amongst the Muslims of this part of the world during the years of the Inquisition. And the Inquisition was very heavy in this place, the local town. Puebla de Don Fadrique is named after the man who basically destroyed Islam here sometime in the 16th century. So their poems and their songs, some of them have recently been recovered. Some of them because they've been making a lot of golf courses in southern Spain. They demolish old houses and they find manuscripts that had been hidden by Muslims hundreds of years ago, and these are being slowly published and made available. So a group of us recorded some of these last year in Granada, and there's a CD which we're selling to raise funds for our new Mosque project in Cambridge. So if you're interested, they'll be available in the tea shop after the post-Asr talk today, inshallah. It's nice stuff. I think you'll not regret your purchase. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Just finishing off some of these athar, and again, to repeat, Imam al-Ghazali gives us a deepening list of athar. The opening ones usually just one of the Salaf talking about the greatness of a particular virtue, and then we get into some of the consequences and inner meanings of those virtues which were understood and even experienced by the Muslims of the first three generations. وكذلك قال بعض السلف إن نعمة الله عليكم أكثر من أن تحصوها وإن ذنوبكم أخفى من أن تعلموها ولكن أصبحوا توابين وأمسوا توابين يغفر لكم ما بين ذلك. Allah's blessings upon you are too numerous for you to number, and your sins are too hidden for you to know. But each morning wake as a penitent, and each evening be a penitent, and that which is between those times will be forgiven you. In other words, have a penitent air to you, which was the spiritual style of the Salaf, self-reproach, the rejection of anger, the rejection of divisive behavior, a good niyyah towards everybody, and the forgiveness will come even for those sins that you never knew you'd committed. وقال أبو هريرة يبعثون يوم القيامة على قدر نياتهم. On the day of judgment, people will be raised up on the basis of and to the extent of their intentions. وكان الفضيل بن عياض إذا قرأ ولنبلونكم حتى نعلم المجاهدين منكم والصابرين ونبلو أخباركم يبكي. Fudail bin Iyad, who was of course one of the great ta'ibs of the early Muslims. The story is that he was a robber, a highwayman who then repented and became one of the great Sufis. He recited this verse, and we shall certainly try you until we know those who truly struggle amongst you and those who have patience, and we shall test you and bring out your news, information about you. So when Al-Fudayl narrated this, he would cry, يبكي, ويرددها, and would repeat it. ويقول, and say, إنك إن بلوتنا فضحتنا وهتكت أستارنا. And he said, when you test us, you cause us to be the subject of scandal, and you lift the veils from us. So his sense is that this verse is actually talking about Allah's knowing the true people of jihad, the true people of struggle, the true people of sabr, by exposing their weaknesses and by allowing false talk and scandals to spread amongst them. And he's saying certainly this will happen to the people of khair. And very often you find this in the lives of the great awliya and the great scholars, that people love to whisper about them and take things about their lives, their private lives, out of proportion and turn it into some enormous thing. And this verse is precisely speaking to those people. وقال أبو هريرة مكتوب في التوراة ما أريد به وجهي فقليله كثير وما أريد به غيري فكثيره قليل. Abu Huraira used to say, it's written in the Torah. And when they say this, they don't necessarily mean the 5 books attributed to Moses, which we have in our hands today, but some original record of the revelation that was given to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam before the Babylonian captivity, when the current text was formulated. So it said in this original revelation, God says, that through which my face is sought, only a little of it is much, and that by which anything other than me is sought, then much of it is little. So this is the idea of niyyah, creating the reality of actions and magnifying or shrinking them. فإذن, this is the end of his section. عماد الأعمال النيات.
intentions are the pillars, the supports for actions. فالعمل مفتقر إلى النية ليصير بها خيرا. Every action needs an intention in order to be a good action. والنية في نفسها خير, but intention in itself is good. وإن تعذر العمل بعائق, even if some obstacle prevents one from carrying out the action. This is going to lead him into another section where he talks about the famous saying that intentions are better than actions, which we might look a little bit at now because the next section I want to spend some time on. It's very theoretical. So briefly, this section, بيان سر قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم نية المؤمن خير من عمله. This is a hadith that's multiply related and is the subject of this whole section, that the believer's intention is better than his action. This turns out to be a very fruitful hadith, and he has much to say about it. So first of all, he lists the existing interpretations. What does it mean for the believer's intention to be better than his action? اعلم أنه قد يظن أن سبب هذا الترجيح أن النية سر لا يطلع عليه إلا الله تعالى. Some might suppose that the reason for this preference is that an intention is a hidden thing which only God, exalted is He, comes to know about, whereas an action is something manifest. وَلِعَمَلِ السِّرِّ فَضْلٌ, and that which we do which is unknown and hidden is better. وَهَذَا صحيح, this is true. وَلَكِنْ لَيْسَ هُوَ الْمُرَادِ, but this is not what he means here. لأنه لو نوى أن يذكر الله تعالى بقلبه أو يتفكر في مصالح المسلمين, because if he intends to please God with his heart, or is thinking about serving the interests of the Muslims, فيقتضي عموم الحديث أن تكون نية التفكر خيرا من التفكر. Then the basic sense of the hadith would have to mean that the intention of thinking about those things would be actually better than thinking about them itself. That's obviously paradoxical. وقد يظن, here's another possible interpretation, أن سبب الترجيح أن النية تدوم إلى آخر العمل والأعمال لا تدوم. So according to this interpretation, a niyyah is better than an action because the niyyah continues implicitly to the end of the action, but actions don't continue. وهو ضعيف. This is a weak interpretation. لأن ذلك يرجع معناه إلى أن العمل الكثير خير من القليل. Because the basis of the meaning of this is that much of an action is better than a little thereof. ليس كذلك. It doesn't have to be like that. فإن نية أعمال الصلاة قد لا تدوم إلا في لحظات معدودة. Because the intention for the action of prayer might continue only for a few moments. والأعمال تدوم, but the actions can actually be longer. والعموم يقتضي أن تكون نيته خيرا من عمله. But the sense of this hadith indicates that his intention is better than the whole act. There's another interpretation. وقد يقال إن معناه أن النية بمجردها خير من العمل بمجرد دون النية. What it means is that the intention on its own is better than the action on its own without an intention. وهو كذلك, and that's correct. ولكنه بعيد أن يكونه المراد, but it's unlikely that this is the meaning. إذ العمل بلا نية أو على الغفلة لا خير فيه أصلا. Because any action without intention or in a state of heedlessness has no good in it at all. والنية بمجردها خير. But an intention, even without an action, reciprocally, is still good. وظاهر الترجيح للمشتركين في أصل الخير. And it's evident that both of them here share in the benefit, but it's clear which one clarity. بل المعني به. Actually, what is meant by this hadith is as follows: أن كل طاعة تنتظم بنية وعمل. Every act of obedience is formed of an intention and an action. كانت النية من جملة الخيرات. The intention is one of the positive things of the action. وكان العمل من جملة الخيرات. So is the action. ولكن النية من جملة الطاعة خير من العمل. But the intention from all aspects of the acts of obedience is better than the component which is action itself. In other words, لكل واحد منهما أثر في المقصود. Both of these things, the meaning and the outward form, have a consequence in what is intended by the action. وأثر النية أكثر من أثر العمل. And the effect of the intention is greater than the effect of the action. فمعناه نية المؤمن من جملة طاعته خير من عمله الذي هو من جملة طاعته. So the meaning of it is the intention of the believer in terms of the totality of his act of obedience is better than the component of the act of obedience, which is the action itself. والغرض أن للعبد اختيارا في النية وفي العمل. What's meant is that the slave of Allah has the capacity to choose in his intention and in his action. فهما عملان, and in that sense they both consist of actions. والنية من الجملة خيرهما فهذا معناه. But the intention in the totality is the best of them. And this is the real meaning. So he resolves this quite difficult hadith by saying that actually to assume that these are two very different things. There is the intention, which is a kind of ghostly state of consciousness, and there is the action, which is what you actually do with your limbs or your words. That's a misunderstanding. In fact, they're both the same sort of thing. Both of them are actions. The intention is also an action because it's something that you choose. It's something that comes about, in a sense, in an involuntary way, but also is something that you can identify with. So both of them are considered to be actions. And if you put those together, which action is better than the other? The inner action is better than the outward one. So we'll have to fast forward because this is a really nice section. Inshallah, we can make some progress on this. So he actually has this long section which we won't be able to complete, which is on this hadith, that the believer's intention is better than his action. And the other half of the hadith is, of course, that the intention of the hypocrite is worse than his action, which gives the thing symmetry and is an intuitive reality that the believer intends to do lots of good things but may not end up doing them. The hypocrite may actually be somebody who publicly has all manner of good works. He may be a Moscow oligarch spending millions on charitable things, but the intention might be a complicated thing. So, to quarry this next chapter, بيان تفصيل الأعمال المتعلقة بالنية. Distinguishing the actions from the point of view of intention. And this is going to be divided into three sections, three types of actions: sins, virtuous actions, and neutral actions. And seeing how intention shapes and relates to each of those three. اعلم أن الأعمال وإن انقسمت أقساما كثيرة من فعل وقول وحركة وسكون وجلب ودفع وفكر وذكر وغير ذلك مما لا يتصور إحصاؤه واستقصاؤه فهي ثلاثة أقسام: معاصٍ وطاعات ومباحات. So he says, know that actions, even though they subdivide into numerous categories, physical actions, things that we say, movements, an absence of movement, bringing things, repelling things, thinking, remembering, and in fact, so many different types of human actions that it's impossible to list them all. They all boil down to three categories: sins, acts of obedience, and things that are intrinsically neutral. So So here's going to get into the important question of if the niyyah is the essence of the thing that we do, does that mean that something that is intrinsically sinful can become something virtuous as a result of a niyyah? There's often a lot of misunderstanding about this. So this is where he begins. Al-Qism al-Awwal al-Ma'asi. First subsection, sins. وهي لا تتغير عن موضوعاتها بالنية. These do not change in their nature as a result of intention. فلا ينبغي أن يفهم الجاهل ذلك من عموم قوله عليه الصلاة والسلام إنما الأعمال بالنيات. It's not right for an ignorant person to suppose this from the general form. If he's saying sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, actions are by intentions. فيظن, so this ignorant person supposes, أن المعصية تنقلب طاعة بالنية, that a sin can become a virtue simply because of intention. كالذي يغتاب إنسانا مراعاة لقلب غيره, like somebody who backbites somebody else in order to make somebody else happy. So you might say, I guess the Imam is saying, at lunch today I was very critical of so-and-so because the chap I was with was depressed and I thought it would cheer him up if his business rival was exposed as a lying scoundrel. So backbiting, according to this misinterpretation, becomes a virtue in that situation. أو يطعم فقيرا من مال غيره, or to steal money in order to feed the poor. أو يبني مدرسة أو مسجدا أو رباطا من مال حرام وقصده الخير, or to build a madrasa or a mosque or a ribat from forbidden wealth with the intention of doing a good thing. فهذا كله جهل. All of this is ignorance. والنية لا تؤثر في إخراجه عن كونه ظلما وعدوانا ومعصية. The changed niyyah does not affect the fact that this act is injustice and an aggression against the rights of others and a sin. بل قصده الخير بالشر على خلاف مقتضى الشرع شر آخر. So to intend to do something good by evil means that are forbidden by the form of the law just brings about a new evil. فإن عرفه فهو معاند للشرع. If somebody knows this, then they are enemies of the revealed law. وإن جهله, if somebody is ignorant of it, فهو عاص بجهله. He is sinful because of his ignorance. إذ طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم, because to seek knowledge is an obligation for every Muslim. والخيرات إنما عرف كونها خيرات بالشرع. And good deeds are only known to be good deeds through revelation. This is Ghazali's Ash'ari assurance. We can only really know what is a virtue and what is a vice, not from our own suppositions or cultural programming, but through revelation. Thou shalt not kill is a truth because it's in revelation, not because everybody says it. It comes from revelation, and that can't change because you can't negotiate with revelation. فكيف يمكن أن يكون الشر خيرا? So how can something evil become something good? هيهات, absurd. بل المروج لذلك على القلب خفي الشهوة وباطن الهوى. The principle within us that makes us think in these terms is a hidden passion and invisible desire or whim. And this again is Ghazali psychologizing very well. Quite often we do haram things by coming up with intentions that we think make those haram things halal. Like my friend once upon a time who spent a lot of time in pubs chatting up young ladies in order to bring them to Islam. He had this interpretation, and the Imam is exactly pointing to this, that there's something within us, murawwid, something that makes us inclined to this because of our instinctive inclination to sin and hawa, and this is batin al-shahwa, hidden desire. And this is very common amongst believers. Usually a believer does not just directly commit a sin, but comes up with some demonically inspired pseudo-reason, usually being reluctant to think about it very clearly, that kind of eases the passage into sin. But it's not possible, the Imam is saying, for sin to become something halal simply by changing one's niyyah. فإن القلب إذا كان مائلا إلى طلب الجاه واستمالة قلوب الناس وسائر حظوظ النفس توسل الشيطان به إلى التلبيس على الجاهل. Because the heart, when it inclines to seeking status and to making others love oneself and the other things that the ego takes pleasure in, the shaitan finds easy paths by which to establish himself in the heart and the ways of the ignorant person. ولذلك قال السهل رحمه الله تعالى ما عصي الله تعالى بمعصية أعظم من الجهل. So this is Sahl al-Tustari again, who's really, the tafsir attributed to him is now available incidentally. It's of the type of Sufi tafsir that is about momentary ecstatic inspirations rather than the formal meaning of the text. It's like poetry tafsir, but it's worth looking at. A very ecstatic person from the Zahid generation. So Imam Sahl says, Allah is not disobeyed with any sin that is worse than ignorance itself. قيل يا أبا محمد هل تعرف شيئا أشد من الجهل? And it was said, do you know anything worse than ignorance? قال نعم الجهل بالجهل. He said, yes, being ignorant of one's own ignorance. This is what they call compound ignorance. In other words, the person who is coming up with these spurious meta-intentional justifications of getting involved in sin and not being aware that it is of what that person is doing. So compound ignorance, being ignorant of one's own ignorance, is the only thing, according to Sahl al-Tustari, that is worse than ignorance itself. But it is very common, and this is why we find in all of these earlier sayings, the Salaf used to say, we used to learn intention just as much as we learned actions themselves. There's an aspect of the Salaf that we've neglected. We learn about all of these fatwas. Do we spend the same amount of time about learning what's going on, the ego playing tricks with ourselves, the devious nature of our weak intentions? Probably not. We're out of balance. وهو كما قال لأن الجهل بالجهل يصد بالكلية باب التعلم فمن يظن بالكلية بنفسه أنه عالم فكيف يتعلم. And this is similar to another saying, that to be ignorant of one's own ignorance closes entirely the door of learning. Because somebody who thinks, is completely convinced that he's already a scholar, how is he going to make progress in further learning? So, yep, there's a lot of stuff here about ignorance, and here he's talking about internal ignorance. But perhaps we should move on. It's a long section to the next bit. So he's talking about ignorance of sin and the way in which sin can't be turned into anything that's not sinful simply by changing the niyyah. Of course, a fiqh disposition could say that if you're in the desert and the only thing to drink is a glass of beer, then it's not a sin to drink the glass of beer. But that's not the same as coming up with some internal mind game, manipulating oneself and the sharia to try and say, well, it's legitimate in the first place. It's a matter of fiqh. Only fiqh can move something from the category of virtue into the category of sin, and vice versa. The intention itself can't be manipulated in that way. So, section 2, at-ta'at, acts of obedience, virtues. وهي مرتبطة بالنيات في أصل صحتها وفي تضاعف فضلها. They're connected, good deeds are connected to intentions in terms of the basis of their validity and also in the degrees of their merit, levels of intensity. So it's the niyyah makes something a good action. The sharia determines its goodness, but the actuality is a good action for you, depends on your intention. But you can also intensify the virtue of a virtue through a focused or compound niyyah. أما الأصل فهو أن ينوي بها عبادة الله تعالى لا غير. The basis of this is to have the intention that by this action you are worshipping Allah alone. فإن والرياء صارت معصية. If you intend ostentation, then it turns into a sin. وَأَمَّا تَضَاعُفِ الْفَضْلِ, as for the intensification of the merit of a good deed, فَبِكَثْرَةِ النِّيَّاتِ الْحَسَنَةِ, it is through the multiplication of good intentions. فإن الطاعة الواحدة يمكن أن ينوى بها خيرات كثيرة. A single good action can be the basis of many good intentions. فيكون له بكل نية ثواب, and one will be rewarded for that action, for each of the intentions that you had for that action. إذ كل واحدة منها حسنة, because each one of them is a good deed. ثم تضاعف كل حسنة عشر أمثالها كما ورد في الخبر. And then each one of those good, rewardable aspects of what you do is multiplied tenfold, as has come in the famous hadith. الحسنة بعشر أمثالها إلى 700 ضعف. So Allah's generosity, a good action is rewarded tenfold, up to 700-fold. It's Allah's generosity, but the sins are not multiplied by the divine decree. Alhamdulillah. And what the Imam is saying is that a single good action, if you have multiple good niyyahs for that action, is multiplied according to the number of those niyyahs, and then this divine multiplier steps in. So it's a good deal. ومثاله القعود في المسجد. He gives an example. You're sitting in the mosque. فإنه طاعة. In itself, it's an act of obedience. Just sitting there is a virtue. ويمكن أن ينوى بها نيات كثيرة حتى يصير من فضائل أعمال المتقين. But one can have, through that action, a number of intentions to the extent that one can attain the merit of the muttaqeen, the people of true taqwa, وَيَبْلُغَ بِهِ دَرَجَاتِ الْمُقَرَّبِينَ, and to reach the degree of those who are brought near to Allah. أَوَّلُهَا, so he's now going to list a whole bunch of possible intentions that can drive a single act, in this case just sitting in the masjid. أَوَّلُهَا, the first, أن يعتقد أنه بيت الله, to have the belief that this is Allah's house. وأن داخله زائر لله, and that the one who comes into it is visiting Allah. فيقصد به زيارة مولاه رجاء لما وعده به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حيث قال من قعد في المسجد فقد زار الله تعالى وحق على المزور إكرام زائره. So, to believe that this is Allah's house, and to know that entering Allah's house is to visit Allah, and to intend the visit of one's Lord in order, out of the hope to receive what the Holy Prophet ﷺ has promised, where he says, whoever sits in the mosque has visited Allah Ta'ala, and it is the haqq, the duty, the nature of the one who is visited to honor the one who visits. وثانيها, a second intention, أن ينتظر الصلاة بعد الصلاة, to wait for a prayer after another prayer, which is something that hardly ever happens nowadays, especially in summertime. Somebody sits after Zuhr and just waits for Asr. But in certain very traditional parts of the world, or in past times, this was not infrequent. فيكون في جملة انتظاره في الصلاة وهو معنى قوله تعالى ورابط. So another intention that one can have is to wait after the prayer for another prayer, and all of one's waiting for the prayer will be reckoned to one as being part of the merit of the prayer. And this is the meaning of his saying, subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Quran, وَالرَّابِطُ, one of the tafsir meanings of the rabitu is at the end of Surah Al-Imran. It's like take the mosque as a kind of fortress, and barricade yourself in it for the worship of your Lord, to protect yourself from vice. وَثَالِثُهَا, the third intention, الترهب بكف السمع والبصر والأعضاء عن الحركات والترددات, to be in a state of almost monastic detachment by protecting your ears and your eyes and your limbs from movements and hesitations. فإن الاعتكاف كف because i'tikaf, staying in the mosque, having that intention, is a protection. وهو في معنى الصوم, and it's part of the meaning of fasting. وهو نوع ترهب, and this is a kind of monastic seclusion. ولذلك قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم رهبانية أمتي القعود في المساجد, that the monasticism of my ummah is to sit in the mosques. ورابعها, and the fourth intention, عقوف الهم على الله, is that one's intention is directed to God. ولزوم السر للفكر في الآخرة, and to continue thinking secretly about the akhirah. ودفع الشواغل الصارفة عنه بالاعتزال إلى المسجد, and by being in a retreat, secluded in the mosque, to be protected from distractions which might make one think about anything else. وخامسها, intention number 5, التجرد لذكر الله, to be detached and focus on Allah's remembrance. أو لاستماع ذكره, or listening to others remembering Him. وللتذكير به, or reminding others of Him. كما روي في الخبر, as is narrated in the account, من غدا إلى المسجد ليذكر الله تعالى أو يذكر به كان كالمجاهد في سبيل الله. The one who, this is not a hadith I think, it's a saying from the early Muslims, whoever goes in the morning to the mosque to remember Allah, or to remember or to remind others of Him, is like the one who struggles in the path of Allah. وسادسها, a lot of them, the sixth possible intention, أن يقصد إفادة علم بأمر بمعروف ونهي عن منكر, to have the intention of spreading knowledge through commanding the good and forbidding the evil. إذ المسجد لا يخلو عمن يسيء صلاته أو يتعاطى ما لا يحل له فأمره بالمعروف فيأمره بالمعروف ويرشده إلى الدين فيكون شريكا معه في خيره الذي يعلم منه فتتضاعف خيراته. So in the mosque there's always somebody who's making a mistake in his prayer, or who's doing something in the mosque that is not halal for him to do. So he can command him to do what is good and guide him to religion, and thereby acquires the reward of the goodness that person will now be practicing, so one's own rewards are multiplied. So an example nowadays, sadly, in mosques in some parts of the world is that people sometimes go there for haram conversations or assignations or drug deals, or all kinds of things happen in mosques, sadly. And if one is in the mosque and you have, as part of this, as it were, basket of intentions that the Imam is proposing, the idea that if I'm in the mosque, I can see if anything untoward is going on, because maybe the Imam's not here, the caretaker's not here, I might be the only one here, somebody might be coming in and doing something haram. I will be in a position to restrain that person. Maybe even my presence will enable me to do that. Or if I see someone and they're getting something wrong in the prayer that invalidates the prayer, if I can find a way of correcting that person without breaking their heart, then I'll have done a good thing, because so many people do go through their lives as Muslims making cardinal mistakes in their wudu and their prayer, because they've just learnt it from some auntie and they get it wrong permanently. And if you are in a position, subtly with kindness and compassion, and not in front of others and not shaming people, to give them the true interpretation, then that's a great favor you can do to that person, and their prayer will be corrected for the rest of their lives. Sometimes we have to make a value call between, am I going to be a busybody by saying, hey brother, you're not holding your hands correctly, this is not the way of whatever, which can be a very heartbreakingly horrible experience for some people in the mosque. And on the other hand, kind of sitting back while somebody is really regularly, every time exposing their aura and invalidating their prayer or some other thing. We had a message recently from the sisters in the balcony, sort of asking whether the brothers could wear longer shirts in future, please. This is something that has to be done, because some people just don't think. But that's a very subtle balance, and one has to think carefully. I was in a mosque in Cambridge recently, and in comes this convert, looking very happy, He prays right, but he's got an earring, big earring. So the Arab guy next to me, during the khutbah, was saying, look at him, sort of with a big smile. And I knew he was just waiting to pounce as soon as the khutbah was over. And that's what he did. He pounced, and to my shame, I guess, I didn't intervene. I didn't have a hadith that could defend the guy. What can you do? I've not seen that convert in the mosque since. And this happens a lot, because people who don't know anything, they come in with whatever from the outside world, and then somebody pounces on them self-righteously, and they think, well, that was pretty horrible, and they don't come again. So that's something to watch out for as well. And unfortunately, a lot of so-called amr bil ma'ruf, nahy anil munkar in the mosques is counterproductive. The mosque in Washington, in comes this non-Muslim woman, just a tourist, to look around, and this probably Sudanese guy gets up and says, as if he was kind of shooing a cat out of the mosque. Great. She didn't have something on her head, I guess. And this was what he thought was his duty, as he was sitting around in the mosque for whatever reason. So this is a sensitive one. And Imam al-Ghazali is very alert to this. And in the book of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, which is one of the rigorous books in the Ihya, he does talk about the danger of actually spreading munkar by inappropriately commanding the good, which very often happens nowadays. People in a Pharisaic, self-righteous way come down on people for sometimes real violations in a way that drives them away. So you do it subtly, indirectly. But it can be, you don't just sit around in the mosque and you see somebody praying to the wrong qibla or something. You have to do something about that. And so it is. So that's one of the intentions that you can have, because amr bil ma'ruf, nahy anil munkar, spotting the drug dealer, spotting the guy who's stealing the shoes or whatever, that's one of the things you can do in the mosque, just keeping an eye on the place. And to have that intention will also be counted to you as a virtue. وسابعها, and the seventh of them, أن يستفيد أخا في الله تعالى فإن ذلك غنيمة وذخيرة للدار الآخرة والمسجد معشش أهل الدين المحبين لله وفي الله. So intention number 7 is to benefit by making a new friend, a new brother for the sake of Allah, because this is a great bounty and blessing, something that will accelerate our movement towards a good outcome in the next world. And the mosque is naturally the nest of the people of piety who love Allah. So part of the hope that you have when you go to the mosque is for your social circle to be expanded in positive ways. This used to be really important, and one of the reasons why modernity is so full of lonely people is that the decline of churches and other places of worship has not been matched by the decline of another place where people come together for something other than just checking their iPads and drinking coffee and not meeting each other's in the eye. We're a very fragmented society because of the loss of collective worship. George Monbiot calls this the age of loneliness. One of the blessings of a congregational style of worship is that you are physically near people and you can get to know them, and regular people in the mosque get to recognize each other. They start to talk, and that can be a really great way of making a friend who will stay with you for the rest of your life. So this is another beneficial intention, our Imam says, of spending time in the masjid. وثامنها أن يترك الذنوب حياء من الله تعالى. That in a mosque, one renounces sins out of shame before Allah. وحياء من أن يتعاطى في بيت الله أن يتعاطى في بيت الله ما يقتضي هتك الحرمة. وقد قال الحسن بن علي رضي الله عنهما: من أدمن الاختلاف إلى المسجد رزقه الله إحدى 7 خصال: أخا مستفادا في الله، أو رحمة مستنزلة، أو علما مستطرفا، أو كلمة تدله على هدى، أو تصرفه على ردى، أو يترك الذنوب خشية أو حياء. He ends this with a great quote from Al-Hasan bin Ali, in the Qut al-Qulub of Abu Talib al-Makki, which is one of the great sources for the Ihya, which kind of sums up this whole section. But the eighth intention is that you can have the intention of going to the mosque in order to diminish your susceptibility to sinfulness. So for instance, if you spend a lot of time on rubbish talk or inappropriate talk on your mobile phone, or stupid texting, or Facebooking, or Snapchat, or whatever else it is that really is probably just chat about celebrities and who's going out with who and sort of salacious things that a lot of people waste a lot of time on, you kind of feel ashamed to do that in Allah's house. Hopefully. You don't go there specifically to find out what Kim Kardashian had for breakfast. It's kind of, most believers would say, well, let's wait a bit and then check out that site. In the mosque, part of the benefit of the mosque is that it makes us behave in a different way. We sit with more dignity. We are more conscious of adab with other human beings, because it is Baytullah, Allah's house, and hopefully our conduct should be less sinful in the mosque than in any other place. So this is the eighth of the Imam's intentions, that you go to the mosque. One of your intentions is to receive a protection from your sinful propensities. So the final quote is from Al-Hasan bin Ali, radiyallahu anhuma, God be pleased with them both. Whoever makes a constant habit of visiting the mosques, Allah will give him one of 7 qualities. He will give him a friend from whom he benefits in the path of Allah, or he will give him some inspirational mercy, or he will give him some useful and new knowledge, or he will cause him to hear a word which will guide him to truth, or which will take him away from some form of destruction, or he will abandon sins out of fear or out of shame. Imam al-Hasan, we tend to think of Imam al-Hussein a lot, but Imam al-Hasan has some very beautiful words, which you have a lot of in the Qut and in the Ihya Ulumuddin. This is very beautiful, and actually includes another one, which Imam al-Ghazali hasn't included in his list, which is the possibility of a mercy or a grace, because the believer who is alert to Allah's presence through his beautiful names in the world, which are part of his essence but not part of his essence, close to him, he's Al-Qarib, should feel closest to Allah in the masjid, should feel that name Al-Qarib in the reverence and the holiness and the limpid tranquility of the mosque. And in those situations where the heart is stilled, it is more likely that some form of inspiration may come about. So those whose spiritual way is to seek guidance through frequent reading of the Qur'an and a very deep personal relationship with the Qur'an will often tell you that the greatest experiences that they've had of the divine presence through the Qur'an directly speaking to them has been when they're reading the Qur'an in the mosque, not in their bedroom or on the subway or whatever, but in the mosque. And there's a particular sir to that. So often forms of spiritual gifts, signs, karamat, inspirations, amazing ideas, new insights that are gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Statistically, what the Imam is saying, they're much, much, much more likely to happen we're in this place of detachment and stillness and seriousness, which is the masjid. So that can be, I guess, a 9th intention. But the Imam has given this just as an example of how we can multiply the validity of our acts without multiplying the number of our acts. فهذا طريق تكثير النيات. This is how we can multiply our intentions. وقس به سائر الطاعات والمباحات. And use this as a basis, create analogies for other acts of virtue and legitimate things. إذ ما من طاعة إلا وتحتمل بنيات كثيرة. Since there is no act of virtue which cannot be the basis for multiple intentions. وإنما تحضر في قلب العبد المؤمن بقدر جده في طلب الخير. And they are present and they proliferate in the heart of Allah's true and believing servant to the extent that he is serious in seeking out what is good. وتشمره له, and making an effort for that. وتفكره فيه, and thinking about the goodness. فبهذا تزكو الأعمال وتتضاعف الحسنات. And in this way, actions become pure and the positive consequences are multiplied. So that's an interesting and important section. And again, the emphasis on rahmah is very clear. Allah gives us things to do. And in each of those things to do, we can be enriched, and we can enrich them by giving them life with multiple intentions and actually thinking about that. And that's what the Salaf used to do, to think about intentions. Why am I in the masjid? Not just because I thought it was 2:30 for the prayer and I came at 2:15 and that's why I'm in the masjid, but to have a solid intention and to think carefully about that and say, well, what is another thing that I could be doing beneficially in this space? Well, I could be making sure that nobody's stealing stuff, or all kinds of practical things. To have those clear in one's mind is actually really helpful, rather than just being vague about, well, maybe I could do good stuff while I'm sitting here. To have those clear in one's mind is excellent, because that's the opposite of the jahl, the ignorance that the Imam started this section by warning us against. Inshallah, we can also move on. It's another long section, but I think this is a rich chapter. Just for completeness, to see what we can get about what he says about niyyah in the mubahat. So we've done what intentions do to sins and what intentions do to virtues. What can an intention do to something that's not intrinsically a sin or a virtue? So I support Tottenham Hotspurs rather than Brighton and Hove Albion. The books of fatwas are not going to give me sort of much indication of whether that's right or wrong. It's one of those general things in the world. Which way do I drive from Granada to Puebla de Don Federica? There's this way. This Sharia leaves this as mubah, as something that's neutral. But intention is going to play a role. وما من شيء من المباحات إلا ويحتمل نية أو نيات يصير بها من محاسن القربات. It's a big opening statement. There is not a single neutral act that does not contain the possibility of being preceded with an intention or several intentions by which it becomes one of the beautiful acts of drawing close to Allah. وَيُنَالُ بِهِ مَعَالِ الدَّرَجَاتِ, and by which one can attain high degrees. فَمَا أَعْظَمُ خُسْرَانُ مَنْ يَغْفُلُ عَنْهَا وَيَتَعَاطَاهَا تَعَاطِيَ الْبَهَائِمِ الْمُهْمَلَةِ عَنْ سَهْوٍ وَغَفْلَةٍ. So how great and foolish is the loss of the person who's unaware of this and just does these neutral things, just as the animals do neutral things, who are just neglected in heedlessness and absent-mindedness. So he's trying to wake us up again. وَلَا يَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَسْتَحْقِرَ الْعَبْدُ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْخَطَرَاتِ وَالْخَطَوَاتِ وَاللَّحَظَاتِ. A human being should never despise any thought or any footstep or any moment. In other words, each of those things has the potential to be something amazing. فَكُلُّ ذَلِكَ يُسْأَلُ عَنْهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَنَّهُ لِمَ فَعَلَهُ وَمَا الَّذِي قَصَدَ بِهِ. Because each of these things will be subject of a question on the last day as to why did you do this, or what was your intention for doing this. هذا في مباح محض لا يشبه كراهة. And this relates to completely neutral things that are not contaminated by any dislike. So it's not the makruh, it's just the mubah. ولذلك قال صلى الله عليه وسلم حلالها حساب وحرامها عذاب. In this world, that which is halal we will be asked about, and that which is haram we will be called to task for. وفي حديث معاذ بن جبل أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, the Holy Prophet says, إن العبد لا يسأل يوم القيامة عن كل شيء حتى عن كحل عينيه وعن فتاة الطينة بإصبعيه وعن لمس ثوب أخيه. So this statement says, the slave will be asked on the day of judgment about everything, even about the kuhl, the cosmetic in his eyes, and about pieces of dust on his fingers, and the way in which he touched the garment of his brother. So apparently trivial things, there will be a question. And there's no kabiratin aw saghiratin illa ahsaha. There's no great thing or little thing but that Allah has reckoned them up. And this is to do with the gravity of the human condition and human life. That even things we do where we seem to be kind of just feet off the pedals and freewheeling, and we're not really going uphill or anywhere in particular, those are also times of enormous value, because each second is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will not be replaced, and the clock never moves backwards, and it's ticking and ticking until it finally stops for us. And each one of those seconds was potentially a time when we could have thought about something beautiful or avoided something ugly. There's no moment of our conscious lives which we cannot ennoble with a better state. And Allah has not created those seconds simply to be ignored. That's part of his name, Al-Muhsi, the enumerator. So then he gets into quite a complex discussion about this. فَإِن قُلْتَ فَمَا الَّذِي يُمْكِنُ أَنْ يُنْوَى بِالطِّيبِ. So he's talking about the hadith that we had earlier, which is that if you put on perfume, intrinsically a neutral thing, in order to please Allah, to ennoble the Eid prayer or whatever it is, that will be something that will cause Allah to make you fragrant on the last day. But if you do it for other than Allah, then your smell on the day of Qiyamah will be uglier than a corpse. So if, for example, say a woman goes for a job interview, or she wants to impress her boss, and she dresses to kill and wears a low-cut dress and covers herself with perfume, this is something that the Sharia deplores. But if she does it for her husband, it's something praiseworthy. So something neutral can become a sin or can become a virtue. فإن قلت فما الذي يمكن أن ينوى بالطيب وهو حظ من حظوظ النفس. What is it one could intend through wearing perfume when it's just something that's kind of a pleasurable thing? وكيف يتطيب لله, and how could one perfume oneself for God? Really, he doesn't smell things. فاعلم أن من يتطيب مثلا يوم الجمعة وفي سائر الأوقات يتصور أن يقصد التنعم بلذات الدنيا. The person who, for instance, puts on perfume on the day of Jumu'ah, on other times, it might be supposed that he's doing this just to enjoy a worldly, sensual experience. أو يقصد به إظهار التفاخر بكثرة المال, or he might be showing off because he's wearing some really expensive perfume. ليحسده الأقران, so others will be envious of him. أو يقصد به رياء الخلق ليقوم له الجاه في قلوبهم. Or he might intend to be showing off to other people so that he has status in their eyes. ويذكر بطيب الرائحة, and be mentioned as somebody who is wearing the latest Lancôme or whatever it is. And this is absolutely valid today, because so much of travel seems to be about people being amongst strangers and in a society where other markers of human appurtenance have vanished, identifying themselves through signalling their own wealth, usually, because that's what's replaced class and piety and culture. Money is what counts. So the experience of business class, the plane that came to Madrid that brought me here and my family from London, business class, and I checked it on the web beforehand, was 4 times more expensive than economy class. The seats are identical. You get a free sandwich, and maybe you get off the plane 2 minutes before everybody else. But that's not really why people do it. It's because they like the experience of sitting there in their narrow seats, and they see all the economy passengers walk past them and look at them. And they're already there with their Financial Times. And they've made it. And that's what they're paying for. Instead of £168, 600 and something pounds, the nafs comes at a price. Has anybody been on a business class flight and reached the destination sooner than somebody in economy class? They're all in the same plane, and it's about travel eventually, but people are prepared to pay a lot. One Gulf government gave me a first-class ticket to America once. It was £12,000. People travelling with their families, and wow, paying £100,000 just so you can have a big seat and the rest of it. It's nafs, and that's exactly what Imam al-Ghazali is saying. And this perfume thing, first thing you see is you're late for your flight and you have to run past these piles of Chanel and Lanvin and all of that. Very frustrating experience. Why is it there? Because that's another way of signaling to passers-by, to casual strangers, you can afford this kind of perfume. It's all about ego, status, silly stuff. And so this is why this hadith comes down very strongly on people like that, who are showing off their status and their wealth just by smelling good. This is something that seems to be timeless. So, other things that you can wear perfume for. He's coming down on the men this time. وَيُذْكَرُ بِطِيبِ الرَّائِحَةِ. So somebody who is described as being somebody who wears this expensive perfume. أو ليتودد به إلى قلوب النساء الأجنبيات. He's wearing perfume so that strange women around him might kind of take an interest in him. إذا كان مستحلا للنظر إليهن. If he thinks that it's permissible for him to look at them. وَلِأُمُورٍ أُخْرَى لَا تُحْصَى. And there's other reasons which are innumerable why somebody might, for dunya reasons, have the intention of wearing a perfume. وَكُلُّ هَذَا يَجْعَلُ التَّطَيُّبَ مَعْصِيَةً. And all of this makes putting on perfume into a sin. فَبِذَلِكَ يَكُونُ أَنْتَنَ مِنَ الْجِيفَةِ فِي الْقِيَامَةِ. And this makes you stinkier than a corpse at the judgment. إِلَى الْقَصْدِ الْأَوَّلِ. Apart from the first intention, وهو التلذذ والتنعم, which is just to have a good experience. فإن ذلك ليس بمعصية. If you're wearing perfume at home just for yourself, well, that's not a sin. إلا أنه يسأل عنه, but you will be asked about it. ومن نوقش الحساب عذب. Famous proverb. Just to be asked about something at the judgment would be such a awe-inspiring thing that it's already a kind of punishment. You just don't want to have all of those things to account for. ومن أتى شيئا من مباح الدنيا لم يعذب عليه في الآخرة. And whoever comes to something of the mubah, of the dunya, won't be punished for it in the akhirah, but ينقص من نعيم الآخرة له بقدره. But the pleasure of the akhirah may be diminished in proportion by this. وناهيك خسرانا بأن يستعجل ما يفنى ويخسر زيارة نعيم يبقى. So it's a sign of ignorance and of loss to take too many pleasures in this world and thereby to be distracted from other things that you could be doing which would bring you pleasures in the next world. So that's all of the bad reasons you can have for sticking on perfume as you go out. وَأَمَّا النِّيَّاتُ الْحَسَنَةُ. As for the good intentions, فأن ينوي باتباع سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يوم الجمعة. One could have the intention of following the sunnah of the Holy Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم on the day of the Jumu'ah. وأن ينوي بذلك أيضا تعظيم المسجد. And also to intend by this to honor the mosque. واحترام بيت الله تعالى. And to respect Allah's house. فلا يرى أن يدخله زائر الله إلا طيب الرائحة. So that Allah sees His visitors, all of them coming in a state of being fragrant. وأن يقصد به ترويح جيرانه ليستريحوا في المسجد. And by spreading a sweet smell, that those sitting around one will feel more comfortable and happy in the mosque. وأن يقصد به دفع الروائح الكريهة عن نفسه التي تؤدي إلى إيذاء مخالطيه. And also to intend to suppress with this perfume any ugly or foul smells that might be around, that might him or people who are near him. وأن يقصد حسم باب الغيبة عن المغتابين إذ اغتابوه بالروائح الكريهة فيعصون الله بسببه. So he's saying, if you go to a mosque and you're a bit smelly, you give people the opportunity to backbite you, which is sinful for them, and so you close the door of their backbiting by smelling good instead. فمن تعرض للغيبة وهو قادر على الاحتراز منها فهو شريك في تلك المعصية كما قيل. So somebody who provides the opportunity for people to commit backbiting becomes somebody who participates in that backbiting. So it's a wisdom of the Sharia never to provide people with an excuse to say something bad, even about oneself. That's one reason why we like to dress well when we go to the mosque and to try and maintain the propriety of outward form so that we don't give other people the possibility of falling into this sin. Okay, فهذا وأمثاله من النيات لا يعجز الفقيه عنها إذا كانت تجارة الآخرة وطلب الخير غالبا على قلبه. So these and other intentions the intelligent person will be aware of if his business is to seek the commerce of the akhirah and the quest for goodness is the dominant mood in his heart. وإذا لم يغلب على قلبه إلى نعيم الدنيا, if his heart is just dominated by desire for the pleasures of dunya, لم تحضره هذه النيات, these intentions won't even occur to him. وإن ذكرت له, if they're mentioned to him, لم ينبعث لها قلبه, his heart is not really motivated by them. فلا يكون معه منها إلا حديث النفس وليس ذلك من النية في شيء. And if he does attempt to impose these intentions upon himself, it'll just be the nafs talking to itself, which is not the same thing as the niyyah. Again, the niyyah cannot be faked. والمباحات كثيرة, the number of permissible things is enormous. ولا يمكن إحصاء النيات فيها, and it's not possible to list all the possible intentions for them. فقيس بهذا الواحد ما عدا, so on the basis of this one case which we've given, analogously deduce what intentions might be for other lawful things. فلهذا قال بعض العارفين من السلف, one of the knowers of Allah amongst the Salaf said, إني لأستحب أن يكون لي في كل شيء نية. I like to have an intention in everything that I do. حتى في أكلي وشربي ونومي ودخولي إلى الخلاء. Even when I eat and I drink and I sleep and I go to the bathroom, I like to have an intention for that, a formal intention, being aware of why I'm doing that, finding some good way of doing this. And then the Imam goes on, but just to summarize where he's leading us, he's inviting us to a form of life where we are what nowadays would be called mindful. Is the world not preoccupied with mindfulness nowadays? Partly because modern consumer society and the entertainment industry know that if we are unfocused, it's easier to part us from our money. So they give us really weird mood music in the supermarkets to make us just not thinking beings. We're like automata, comatose, just so they'll put more things in the shopping basket. And everybody is doing that to us. There's something about consumer capitalism that anesthetizes the human brain. Because if we're really thinking sharply, we'll buy a lot less stuff. And we'll get into less debt, which is death to the system. So the mindfulness movement is partly secular, partly quasi-Buddhistic reaction to what's happening to the human brain in terms of a radical disconnection from what's around us. The dreamlike state in which people glide through departures at Terminal 5 and then suddenly there's somebody who wants to see if you've got that expensive perfume in your bag and put it in a little bag and kind of snap out of it. This comatose state which is facilitated by endless texting and endless messaging, and the computer multi-screening revolution has done a lot to damage even the formal structures of the human brain, and neuroscientists have looked at the consequences of modernity on the mind, the fact that we don't remember very much any longer, we haven't memorized anything. Depression, anxiety, these states are often physiological, neurological states caused by the fact that certain aspects of the brain are just not being used very much. And I gave a talk about this recently. And the study of the brain is still in its infancy, but we do know that the brain is not being properly used, and to be in a state of dreaminess all the time is not right, because what were we in primordial times? We were looking after the babies, or we were out there with a spear killing woolly mammoths or something, and for both of those things you need to be focused. Human beings survive, pass on their DNA by being focused and attentive, not by dreaming in front of dreamworks. You know, we're supposed to be sharp and paying attention. So this mindfulness thing is a secular, belated reaction to the fact that we're in a coma. Imam al-Ghazali is giving us this image of a life in which everything is known to be important, because it's not just another thing you do with your finite and ultimately meaningless days, but is something that has eternal consequences. That virtue and vice really, really matter, because through virtue you are conforming to the intended nature of the universe, and by vice you are attempting in your ignorant and futile way to rebel against the true and good and beautiful nature of the universe and against your deepest instincts. And even in these mubahat, it's not good that in the mubah we are just spacing out and being distracted. So religion in this full and intense version offers us a way of complete mindfulness. And if intention is the essence of what human consciousness is, by applying to ourselves the religious virtue and duty of being intent in everything that we do, we actually live deeper and more living lives. We don't kind of wake up at the end of our life and think, well, that was quick and that was weird. كأنهم يوم يرونها لم يلبثوا إلا عشية أو ضحاها. As if the unbelievers at the end of their lives, they say, we only stayed a day or an evening in this world. It went by so quick. Can I have it again, please? No. That's it. That's the biggest waste, just not to use these times. So religion is benefiting us by saying, pay attention. Look to these universal virtues of courage and nurturing and compassion and empathy and dignity and prayer and all of these primordial human things, and be fully mindful and attentive in them, and avoid these other things that are just going to pull you down, because the nafs is taking you down into your own private hell where you don't want to be. So it's all mercy, and it's all about being fully alive. Allah says, يَدْعُوكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. He calls you to what gives you life. Not just in the akhirah, which is al-hayawan, life itself with a capital L, when everything is intense and perfect and luminous and near in every moment, and there's no possibility of spacing out and being distracted, because there He is, subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is beauty, no more ugliness. But also in this dunya we can make it an anticipation of that. We can be attentive gardeners, we can be watch out for the bugs and the worms and the maggots and the black fly that are getting in the way of the cultivation of our heart, and being scrupulous. Talk to any great gardener and they'll tell you can't waste a minute. There's always something trying to corrupt the thing. Gardens don't just happen. So this is a real technology of mindfulness, not something that just is going to make you better at trading stocks or something, but real mindfulness, really being alive. And part of the irony of modernity is that we live a long time by historical standards, but we live with this capital L, if you like, for rather a short time, because we're just drifting, or as that American classic says, being entertained to death. It's just kind of, what is this? Is the Matrix type of idea of humanity as comatose. Not quite that bad, but there's a sense that we're in a dream, and we are asked to wake up. الناس نيام فإذا ماتوا انتبهوا. People are asleep. When they die, they wake up. But also, موتوا قبل أن تموتوا. Die before you die. Be aware of the unique, brilliant perfection and terrible intensity of every single moment. Whatever you're doing, Just think with your soul and see the amazing wonder of it. Get back to this, what we mentioned on Tuesdays, being the childlike directedness. Babies are often much more focused than we are. You look at a baby inspecting its hand for the first time. That's really amazing. The baby's right. I look at my hand and I didn't think about it for 10 years. That's a shame. That's an amazing piece of technology. Pretty spectacular kit, but I'm kind of busy with whatever. The baby knows what it's doing. It's discovering the wonder, the amazingness of the world. And the Quran is all about telling us to look at the amazingness of the world. يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. We come to Rosales and the dust from the city is kind of smacked out of our brain after a while. We return to that Quranic state of being alive, to Al-Qarib and the other names, just by the wonder and improbability of it all. But the modern world doesn't know how to make money out of that, and so they make us rather bored and jaded and anxious and unsatisfied. What a shame. We destroy the natural world in order to create a human world that is kind of miserable and dissatisfied. Well, that's not a very good deal. So, but alhamdulillah, we can't get out of Allah's world, and everything in it, including to people of Basira, apparently secular and dismal situations, you can always find wonder in them. Airport departure lounge, maybe it's not so exciting, going to W.H. Smith once again, or buying the same sports gear or the overpriced sunglasses, and it's kind of awful. You have no choice, kind of compulsory purchase. What else is there to do? But what there is to do is to look at other human beings, the beauty of the children, the families, the people being reunited after long-haul flights. There's a lot of beauty there as well. It's in the human experience that Allah's signs are actually at their deepest and most moving. So the believer needs to scan those situations and to be in a state of wonder at the sheer majestic improbability of being. And that shouldn't be too difficult for us. If babies can do it, are we really completely out of the habit? Anyway, alhamdulillah, we've had the opportunity to speak at somewhat more length this time, and I think that this has given us the opportunity to see where the Imam is taking us with what often seems to be a rather tough and self-judgmental, self-scrutinizing thing. It's actually all about waking up. What's dreadful is the jahl and the ghafla, just floating through life. What's important is this possibility that the Salaf had of being intensely aware and alive and alert in every moment. Better to live like that for 20 years than to listen to the kind of music that you get in elevators for 80 years, and to end up dribbling in an old people's home and nobody there is able to tell you what it was all about. That's what modernity offers, but intensity, the luminosity, the miracle of being is what human beings should be most enlivened by. And that's exactly what Imam al-Ghazali is inviting us to in this book about intention. Barakallahu fikum wal afu minkum wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
بسم الله الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. Resuming our brief and shallow journey through the Kitab al-Niyya of Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya, we reach now a paradox which we've mentioned a few times, which might by this point of the argument seem strange. After all, has not the Imam been urging us to look within, to consider what it is that motivates us, and seemingly to rectify our intentions? But now he has a whole chapter which he entitles Bayanu Tafsilul A'mal al-Muta'allaqa bi-Niyya, and Bayan anna niyyata ghayr dakhila tahta al-ikhtiyar. An exposition that intention is not subject to choice. And this startles us, but again, he kind of slaps us around a bit by beginning with a warning against our ignorance
اعلم أن الجاهل يسمع ما ذكرناه من الوصية بتحسين النية وتكثيرها. Be it known unto you that the ignorant person listens to what we have mentioned about how about the need to improve one's intention and to multiply one's intentions. مع قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما الأعمال بالنيات, along with his saying عليه الصلاة والسلام, actions are by intentions. فيقول في نفسه عند تدريسه أو تجارته أو أكله. So he says when he's teaching or doing business or just eating, نويت أن أدرس لله أو أتجر لله أو آكل لله. I intend to teach for Allah, or I intend to do business for Allah, or I intend to eat this meal for Allah. ويظن أن ذلك نية, and he thinks that that's his intention. وهيهات, that's absurd. فذلك حديث النفس, that's just a voice in the consciousness. أو حديث لسان أو فكر, or a voice proceeding from his tongue, or an idea in his head. أو انتقال من خاطر إلى خاطر, or a movement from one passing thought to another passing thought. والنية بمعزل عن جميع ذلك, but the intention is something completely different to any of that. وإنما النية انبعاث النفس وتوجهها وميلها إلى ما ظهر لها أن فيه غرضها. An intention, by contrast, is the self's rising up and directing itself and naturally inclining to what is clear to it intrinsically that it is its purpose and its interest. إما عاجلا أو آجلا, in this world or the next. والميل إذا لم يكن لا يمكن اختراعه واكتسابه بمجرد الإرادة. And this inclination cannot be invented or acquired simply by willpower. بل ذلك كقول الشعبان نويت أن أشتهي الطعام. That would be like the person who is full of food. I intend to desire food. وأميل إليه, and incline to eat. أو قول الفارغ نويت أن أعشق فلانا وأحبه وأعظمه بقلبي. Or the saying of some idle person, I intend to love so-and-so and consider him to be a great and a glorious person in the depths of my heart. فذلك محال, that's just not possible. بل لا طريق إلى اكتساب صرف القلب إلى الشيء وميله إليه وتوجهه نحوه إلا باكتساب أسبابه. There is no way to acquire the heart's inclination to a thing and its being directed to it and oriented in its direction except by acquiring the reasons for that inclination. وذلك مما قد يقدر عليه وقد لا يقدر عليه. And a human being may be able to do that and may find it impossible. وإنما تنبعث النفس إلى الفعل إجابة للغرض الباعث الموافق للنفس الملائم لها. And the soul, the self, the consciousness only rises and in order to carry out an action in response to the purpose which motivates it, which corresponds with its desires and is in compatibility with them. ولا ما لم يعتقد الإنسان أن غرضه منوط بفعل من الأفعال. For as long as a person thinks that such and such a purpose is not connected to a particular action, فلا يتوجه نحوه قصده, then his purpose will not be directed to that thing. وذلك مما لا يقدر على اعتقاده في كل حين. And he may not be able to maintain that belief just at any time. وإذا اعتقد فإنما يتوجه القلب إذا كان فارغا غير مصروف عنه بغرض شاغل أقوى منه. And if the heart is directed to something, if he's able to direct his consciousness towards such a thing, that's only possible if its heart is not actually directed by and distracted by another thing which is stronger than it.
وذلك لا يمكن في كل وقت, and that's not always possible. والدواعي والصوارف لها أسباب وكثيرة بها تجتمع ويختلف ذلك بالأشخاص وبالأحوال وبالأعمال. And the various inner distractions and motivations themselves are the result of many factors which can come together in a certain thing to produce an intention, but that depends on individuals and on their circumstances and on the actions which they're intending. So he's immediately, as it were, forced us to think again about the conclusion that we seem to have superficially drawn so far, which is that what really matters in our lives is what we do with mindfulness, attentiveness, and we need to focus and make sure our intentions are right. And then he kind of pushes us back by saying, you can't actually control your intention. Your intention is something too deep for you just to be able to steer it. It's not like telling your hand to move, or even about forcing your brain to think about solving a particular mathematical problem. It's something deeper because it's like an instinct. It's too deep within your consciousness to be the subject of your consciousness's direction of it. It is what you are. So this is the next point that he's making, but he's already hinted that even though you can't change your intention, if you've just had a great meal in the cafeteria here, you can't just by force of will saying, I intend to be hungry now. This can't be done. You cannot form that intention. Or you can't just say, I intend to love such and such a person. You can say, I intend to make such and such a person love me, and half of Verdi's operas are based on that particular idea. But in terms of your own inclinations, you can't do it. So he's saying the only thing that you should be looking at is the reasons which generate that fixed disposition of the soul, and see what you can do about those. So this is where the riyada, the tazkiyah, the discipline comes into its own. And then he gives some more examples. فإذا غلبت شهوة النكاح مثلا ولم يعتقد غرضا صحيحا في الولد دينا ولا دنيا لا يمكنه أن يواقع على نية الولد. So if somebody is going into his wife in a state of desire, it's not possible for his dominant intention to be to have a child. بل لا يمكن إلا على نية قضاء الشهوة. His intention is going to be the satisfaction of desire. إذ النية هي إجابة الباعث. The intention is in itself the response to the underlying motivation. ولا باعث إلا الشهوة. And if his motivation is his dominant state, which is desire, فكيف ينوي الولد? How can he suddenly turn that intention into being the intention to have children? وإذا لم يغلب على قلبه أن إقامة سنة النكاح اتباعا لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يعظم فضلها لا يمكن أن ينوي النكاح بالنكاح اتباع السنة إلا أن يقول ذلك بلسانه وقلبه وهو حديث محض وليس بنية. So a person, when he's getting married because of desire, cannot have in his intention the desire to follow the sunnah of the chosen one sallallahu alaihi wasallam and acquire the great merit which is in that. The most he can do is to say with his tongue and in his inner self, I intend this, but this is hadithun mahd. It's just words, stream of consciousness in a chit-chat. وَلَيْسَ بِنِيَّةٍ. It's not an intention. نعم طريق اكتساب هذه النية مثلا أن يقوي أولا إيمانه بالشرع. So the way in which he can acquire this good niyyah, rather than the animal niyyah, for example, is first of all to acquire strong conviction of about the revealed law. ويقوي إيمانه بعزم ثواب من يسعى في تكثير أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. And for his belief to become stronger, he should work on his iman and to become more convinced inwardly of the reward that attaches to those who increase the number of the followers of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَيَدْفَعُ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ جَمِيعَ الْمُنَفِّرَاتِ عَنِ الْوَلَدِ. And also to force himself to dismiss all of the inward hesitations that there might be about what it would be like to have a child. مِنْ ثُقْلِ الْمُؤْنَةِ وَطُولِ التَّعْبِ وَغَيْرِهِ. Because it would be expensive and really exhausting and so forth. All of that has to be pushed out. So that's not changing the niyyah, that's changing one of the things that are influencing the kind of niyyah that's going to be there. فإذا فعل ذلك ربما انبعثت من قلبه رغبة إلى تحصيل الولد للثواب. If he's able to do this internal discipline, it may be that from his heart will arise a desire for obtaining a child for the sake of reward. فتحركه تلك الرغبة وتتحرك أعضاؤه لمباشرة العقد. And so that this desire will come to the surface, will become the basis of his desire for marriage. فإذا انتهضت القدرة المحركة للسان بقبول العقل طاعة لهذا الباعث الغالب على القلب. And when the time comes for him to pronounce the formula of marriage, this has come to the fore, and this does become his intention. كان ناويا فإن لم يكن كذلك فما يقدره في نفسه ويردده في قلبه من قصد الولد وسواس وهذيان. But if he hasn't made these deep inner adjustments, then when he says, I intend the nikah, following the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Rasulullah, which is the official niyyah for nikah, when he says those things, it's not his niyyah, it's waswas and hadayan, just loose talk, wild, unpurposed words. Okay, and that kind of makes sense, even though it seems hard, because it seems to take us away from this idea that we really like to have, that we are masters of our own ships, and anything that's within us is subject to our determination if only we're disciplined enough. He's saying you can't control your niyyah. What you can do, however, is to examine your niyyah, and if it's not in correspondence to the divine command, to see why not, and to change the basic factors which have generated that niyyah. That's the way to do it. And then he gives us some very startling examples of how important and deep was this insight amongst the earliest Muslims. ولهذا امتنع جماعة من السلف من جملة الطاعات إذا لم تحضرهم النية. And for this reason, some of the early Muslims, the Salaf, refrained from certain categories of virtuous actions if the niyyah was simply not present. فكانوا يقولون ليس تحضرنا فيه نية. And they used to say, I don't have a niyyah in this. حتى إن ابن سيرين لم يصلي على جنازة الحسن البصري وقال ليس تحضرني نية. Ibn Sirin, we know him as one of the great Imams of the Tabi'een in Iraq and the author of the famous Book of Dreams, which is attributed to him. He didn't pray in the janazah of Al-Hasan al-Basri because he said, I don't have the niyyah in it. I could go and just be there, but the niyyah is not present. ونادى بعضهم امرأته. What's this one about? وكان يسرح شعره أنهات المدراء. So one of them called his wife when he was combing his hair, and the hair here is a kind of thick, almost African hair that needs a particular kind of comb, a midra, saying, bring me that kind of comb. فقالت أجيء بالمرآة. And she said, maybe she hadn't heard him properly, should I bring the mirror? فسكت ساعة ثم قال نعم. And he went quiet for a bit, and then he said, yes, please. فقيل له في ذلك. And somebody afterwards said, what was that about? You wanted the comb, not the mirror. فقال كان لي في المدرى نية ولم تحضرني في المرآة نية. I had the intention of wanting the comb, but the intention of the mirror was not present within me. فَتَوَقَّفْتُ حَتَّى هَيَّأَهَا اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. And I stopped until Allah generated that niyyah within me. And sometimes when you read the stories, you think about the extreme punctiliousness, fastidiousness of their inward lives, that they wanted to be absolutely sincere and what we would say mindful in everything that they did. And we're so far from that, because the ego is dominant in almost all of our conditions, that it's hard for us to imagine this kind of disciplined awareness that life in its fullness is led only when you really have an intention behind everything that you do. But these are stories reported of many of the earliest Muslims. ومات حماد بن أبي سليمان, one of the hadith scholars, وكان أحد علماء أهل الكوفة, one of the scholars of the people of Kufa, فقيل للثوري ألا تشهد جنازته, and Sufyan al-Thawri was asked, aren't you going to his funeral? قال لو كان لي نية لفعلت, and he said, if I had the intention, I would go. وكانوا إذا سئلوا عملا من أعمال البر قالوا إن رزقنا الله تعالى نية فعلنا. And the Salaf, when they were asked to perform some righteous deed or other, would say, if Allah bestows the niyyah upon us, we will do it. Which is a really deep and startling way of looking at things, and also a way of removing any kind of egotism. Because if the niyyah to do some good thing is something that is the divine bestowal upon you, you can't really claim credit for anything that you're doing. It's just divine gift, and this is the meaning of Islam, of submitting, just hoping that you're in the way of Allah's bestowal of positive intentions, positive niyyahs. وكان طاووس لا يحدث إلا بنية. Tawus bin Kaysan, the great muhaddith of Yemen and Mecca, was well known for this issue of niyyah. And all of this is a helpful way of getting us away from the idea that the Salaf were, what should we say, fundamentalists. In other words, they just took the outward form of everything and they did that, and the inwardness wasn't really discussed very much. In fact, what you find is that the inward nature of actions is so gigantically important that they felt that if they weren't inwardly disposed towards a particular optional good deed, they would not actually do that. The niyyah would be for something else. The Salaf were a spiritual, not a legalistic generation. So Tawus would not narrate hadith unless he had the niyyah. وَكَانَ يُسْأَلُ أَنْ يُحَدِّثَ فَلَا يُحَدِّث. Students would come and ask him for hadiths and he wouldn't narrate. وَلَا يُسْأَلْ فِيَبْتَدِئ. And sometimes nobody was asking him for a hadith, but he would narrate hadiths anyway. فَقِيلَ لَهُ فِي ذَلِكَ, and he was asked about that. قال أفتحبون أن أحدث بغير نية? Do you want me to teach hadiths without a niyyah? إذا حضرتني نية فعلت. When the niyyah comes to me, I do it. This is, here's Tawus again. قيل لطاووس ادع لنا فقال حتى أجد له نية. Tawus was asked, pray for me, and somebody will say, when the niyyah comes to me. That's what he'd say. All of this sounds rather startling, but these are people in a world of, again, fastidious, pietistic understanding that they don't want to do things just formulaically. And you, although it seems stern, can see the value of that. Somebody comes to you and say, please pray for me, and you just go through the motions of it. That's not good. That's not honoring the act of prayer. Prayer should be a real communion with your Lord. So if somebody comes to you and says, pray for me, the best thing is to say, inshallah, and you remember that person subsequently when you're in a time where you have the intention of praying for people, and then you do it. But just to say, just to please them is not the right way. So this is how they were. And of course, they were profoundly uninterested in what anybody would think of them. Somebody would come and be frustrated because the Imam wasn't praying for him. It's too bad. He's not going to pray in a superficial way. Yeah, so these are similar stories. Okay, so after reciting these startling reminders of how single-minded the Salaf were in their intention, that there should not be action without intention, the Imam then gives some analysis. نعم من كان الغالب على قلبه أمر الدين تيسر عليه في أكثر الأحوال إحضار النية للخيرات. He says, yes, however, whoever's situation is that religion is the dominant principle in his heart, in his consciousness, in most circumstances, it will be easy for an intention to come to him for good actions. فإن قلبه مائل بالجملة إلى أصل الخير, because his heart is already intrinsically inclined to the basis of goodness and good deeds. فينبعث إلى التفاصيل غالبا. And so in most cases, the niyyah will naturally rise to the surface and be present when good deeds are asked of one. ومن مال قلبه إلى الدنيا وغلبت عليه لم يتيسر له ذلك. And whoever's essential state is a love of the world and worldly scenarios and worldly desires, usually the production of a real niyyah will not be easy for such a person. بل لا يتيسر له في الفرائض إلا بجهد جهيد. It will be difficult for such a person even in obligatory acts, except with what feels to him like a great effort. وغايته أن يتذكر النار ويحذر نفسه عقابها. And the most that he can supply by way of motivation to generate a sound niyyah is going to be basic fear of hellfire, warning himself of the punishment of somebody who abandons that particular action. أو نعيم الجنة, or the delights of paradise. ويرغب نفسه فيها, and inclining himself towards that delight. فَرُبَّمَا تَنْبَعِثُ لَهُ دَاعِيَةٌ ضَعِيفًا. And it may be that after reminding himself of heaven and hell, there'll be a weak motivation that pushes him along and sends him, say, to the mosque. فَيَكُونُ ثَوَابُهُ بِقَدْرِ رَغْبَتِهِ وَنِيَّتِهِ. And his reward for that prayer will be proportionate to his desire and his intention. So at the most basic level, the motivation of the weak, people who are dunya-oriented, will be fear of Allah's punishment and hope for his reward, rather than just love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, love of complying with the noble form of the sunnah, love of being with the believers, just the love of worship itself. It's going to be the carrot and the stick. وَأَمَّا الطَّاعَةُ عَلَى نِيَّةِ إِجْلَالِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى لِاسْتِحْقَاقِهِ الطَّاعَةَ وَالْعُبُودِيَّةِ. As for an act of obedience to God with the intention of magnifying him because of his deserving obedience and the slavehood of his servants. فَلَا تَتَيَسَّرُ لِلرَّاغِبِ فِي الدُّنْيَا. This is a difficult thing to somebody who really is directed towards dunya. وَهَذِهِ أَعَزُّ النِّيَّاتِ وَأَعْلَاهَا. And this is the rarest of intentions and the highest of them. وَيَعِزُّ عَلَى بَسِيطِ الْأَرْضِ مَنْ يَفْهَمُهَا فَضْلًا عَمَّا يَتَعَاطَاهَا. And it's rare to find on the surface of the earth somebody who understands this niyyah, quite apart from somebody who actually has this niyyah. And this again is Ghazali's method of suluk. The carrot and the stick are necessary for us base humans. Probably wouldn't bother with a lot of the fundamental practices of Islam, but for Allah's wrath and the prospect of his mercy. But the higher thing is, of course, to recognize the entitlement, the nobility, the majesty of the creator of all things, the one who gives us every breath that we take, who doesn't ask for very much from us. His generosity, his nobility, his perfection, the appropriateness of the act of worship to the divine nature, the prostration in his presence. That niyyah is something unusual amongst worshippers, he's saying. This is even in his time, 9 centuries ago, so where are we? وَالنِّيَّاتُ النَّاسِ فِي الطَّاعَاتِ أَقْسَامٍ. People have different types of intention when they come to virtuous deeds. إذ منهم من يكون عمله إجابة لباعث الخوف. There are some human beings who are driven religiously by the motive of fear. فإنه يتقي النار. He doesn't want to go to hell. ومنهم من يعمل إجابة لباعث الرجاء. And other people are driven by the motive, the emotion of hope. وهو الرغبة في الجنة. This desire for the garden. وهذا وإن كان نازلا بالإضافة إلى قصد طاعة الله وتعظيمه لذاته ولجلاله لا لأمر سواه. And this, even though it's less noble when compared to the intention of obeying God and magnifying Him and glorifying Him because of His nature and His majesty, not for any other reason, فهو من جملة النيات الصحيحة. It's still a good, sound intention. لأنه ميل إلى الموعود في الآخرة. Because it's otherworldly, it's not material. It's an inclination towards what has been promised in the next world. وإن كان من جنس المألوفات في الدنيا, even if it is something that is in the same category of things that we're familiar with in this world. We know what a fire is, we know what a garden is. وأغلب البواعث باعث الفرج والبطن. And the strongest motivations among human beings are the motivations of physical pleasure, eating and marriage. وموضع قضاء وطرها الجنة. And the place where this is finally perfected and consummated is paradise. فالعامل لأجل الجنة عامل لبطنه وفرجه. So somebody who is just interested in the garden as a garden is essentially driven by a desire to gratify the senses. كالأجير السوق, like a servant who just does what is told. وَدَرَجَتُهُ دَرَجَةُ الْبُلْ. And his degree is the degree of the simple, uncomprehending ones. وَإِنَّهُ لَيَنَالُهَا بِعَمَلِهِ إِذْ أَكْثَرُ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ الْبُلْ. But he will get there through his actions, since, as the hadith says, most people in paradise are simple folk. وَأَمَّا عِبَادَةُ ذَوِي الْأَلْبَابِ. As for the worship of people of deep core, of deep insight, فَلَا تَجَاوَزُوا ذِكْرَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَالْفِكْرَ فِيهِ حُبًّا لِجَمَالِهِ وَجَلَالِهِ. It is focused on remembering Allah and thinking about Him out of love for His beauty and His majesty. وَسَائِرُ الْأَعْمَالِ تَكُونُ مُؤَكِّدَاتٌ وَرَوَادِفٌ. And all of that person's other actions in his life are going to be things that either emphasize this love for God or are the consequences of this love for God. وَهَؤُلَاءِ أَرْفَعُ دَرَجَةً مِنَ الْإِلْتِفَاتِ إِلَى الْمَنْكُوحِ وَالْمَطْعُومِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. And these people are in a higher state than those who simply think about the satisfaction of pleasures in paradise. فَإِنَّهُمْ لَمْ يَقْصُدُوهَا بل هم الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه فقط. Because it is not for those things that they aspire for salvation, but it is they who, and this is from the Quran, who call upon their Lord morning and eve, wishing for His face, يريدون وجهه, which is the Quranic verse that started this whole book. That's what they want, فقط. They want God. وثواب الناس بقدر نياتهم, and people's reward shall be in proportion to their intentions. فلا جرم يتنعمون بالنظر إلى وجهه الكريم, and these people shall certainly find their delight in gazing upon God's beautiful face. ويسخرون ممن يلتفت إلى وجوه الحور العين كما يسخر المتنعم بالنظر إلى الحور العين ممن يتنعم بالنظر إلى وجه الصور المصنوعة من الطين. And they will despise those who are just focusing on the faces of the Hur al-Ain, just as those who are gazing at the faces of the beautiful maidens of paradise, the Hur al-Ain, would despise those who are just looking at pictures or images made out of clay. بل أشد, it would be an even stronger disdain. فإن التفاوت بين جمال حضرة الربوبية وجمال الحور العين أشد وأعظم كثيرا من التفاوت بين جمال الحور العين والصور المصنوعة من الطين. He said it would actually be even stronger
because the difference in degree between the beauty of the presence of lordship and the beauty of the hur is greater. There's a greater disparity there, much greater disparity than the disparity which exists between the beauty of the faces of the heavenly maidens and the beauty of statues made out of clay. بل استعظام النفوس البهيمية الشهوانية لقضاء الوطر ومخالطة الحسان وإعراضها عن جمال وجه الله الكريم يضاهي استعظام الخنفساء لصاحبتها وإلفها لها وإعراضها عن النظر إلى جمال وجوه النساء فعمى أكثر القلوب عن إبصار جمال الله وجلاله يضاهي عمي الخنفساء عن إدراك جمال النساء and so on. This is a culturally specific reference. He's talking about the fact that most people can only conceive of beauty in terms of the manifestations of beauty and can't conceive of beauty in terms of beauty as it is in itself, which is the divine nature. That most people are distracted by the manifestation from the source. وحكي أن أحمد بن خضروي رأى ربه تعالى في المنام. Ahmad bin Khadraway, one of these early ascetics, once saw his Lord in a dream. فقال له كل الناس يطلبون مني الجنة إلى أبا يزيد فإنه يطلبني. And Allah said to him, everybody is seeking me because they want to go to heaven, except for Abu Yazid, because he is just seeking me. Abu Yazid al-Bistami, the famous wandering ascetic, ecstatic, utterer of strange expressions because of his passionate, intoxicated love for God. Yeah. This is a famous one. وَرَأَى أَبُو يَزِيدَ رَبَّهُ فِي الْمَنَامِ. Abu Yazid al-Bistami, قَدَّسَ اللَّهُ سِرَّهُ, once saw his Lord in a dream. فَقَالَ يَا رَبِّ, and said, O Lord, كَيْفَ الطَّرِيقُ إِلَيْكَ? Where is the road to you? فَقَالَ أُتْرُكْ نَفْسَكَ وَتَعَالَ. And he says, leave yourself behind and come. Sounds simple. والغرض أن هذه النيات متفاوتة بتفاوت الدرجات ومن غلب على قلبه واحدة منها ربما لا يتيسر له العدول إلى غيرها. So he's here talking about the immense difference of people's intentions, and that even though these intentions, fear of hell, desire for the garden, desire for the ultimate archetypal reality of certain pleasures that exist in a flawed way in this life, these are all good things. They can't be compared to the highest niyyah of all, the strongest niyyah, the niyyah that motivates Allah's siddiqun, this awliya, with just the desire for God. He then goes into a debate with the Zahir ulama who are unhappy with these stories of the early Muslims having apparently renounced certain things that are not obligatory but meritorious because they felt that the niyyah wasn't present. There's always a Zahiri tendency that says it's the outward form that's required and the inward is not the significant object of the divine regard. And he goes into an interesting discussion, if we had time for all of it, where he talks about, I guess, what we would nowadays call a kind of fanaticism. And he's aware of this possibility in his age. There was a district in Baghdad where certain hardline Hanabila used to live, whose idea was that the way to please God is just to
to create whole mountains of good deeds, and that's all that's required. Every last little sunnah prayer, every last little thing, every optional fast, you just do all of these and you're the wali. And he's carefully crafted this chapter as a refutation of that, because his quotes have been from the early Muslims themselves, who he's clearly indicated were not people like that. They were people who cared about intention, about the inner meaning of actions. That was the whole point of the tawbah, self-scrutiny ethos of the early Muslims. They were not pharisaical acquirers of outward meritorious deeds. They were concerned with making sure that the spirit was in the letter. So, he then adds a warning about the danger of this kind of mentality, and says that there are times when certain theoretical pious deeds that we could be doing at a time, we aren't actually required to do them. And it can be dangerous for our inner life, which is concerned with if we do them. So we shouldn't think that we've committed a sin or done something bad simply because all of the optional prayers in the day, the duha, the awabin and so forth, we're not doing them. Because there's a danger of, we might call it burning out, of overdoing things, which is the danger of a certain type of fundamentalist, furious religion. So he here comes up with some sayings from the early Muslims who are warning against this, and are saying that we do have the right to a kind of downtime, a time when we are relaxing. Abu Darda, the great Sahaba, إني لا أستجم نفسي بشيء من اللهو فيكون ذلك عونا لي على الحق. Sometimes I engage in lahu, and just playfulness, sort of like conversation with friends, playing a game of some kind. فَيَكُونُ ذَلِكَ عَوْنًا لِي عَلَى الْحَقِّ. And this helps me in my search for truth, in my pursuit of God. وقال علي كرم الله وجهه روح القلوب فإنها إذا أكرهت عميت. This is an important principle from Imam Ali, saying, it's kind of lighten up, give rest to your hearts, because when they are forced, they turn blind. And this is something that has an individual and a collective aspect. We mentioned earlier the danger of shirk al-ihtisab. If you're forcing people to be religious all the time, then intention will be compromised and they may end up hating religion, which is what happens with a lot of fundamentalist movements nowadays. They try to drag ordinary Muslims into heaven by the scruff of their necks, and people end up just resenting religion, even though the intention of those who are holding the stick over them is to make them conform. In fact, they're weakening their faith, and this is the deeper meaning of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. So Imam Ali himself, the master of Fatwa, the one with the two-pointed sword, the one whose sword is against the nafs as well as the external emery, is saying this. Give ease to the hearts, because if they're forced into something, they become blind. وهذه دقائق لا يدركها إلا سماسرة العلماء. And these are subtle things which are only understood by the great scholars. دون الحشوية منهم. Not the hashwiyya amongst them. This is a kind of really rude term in his word for people we'd nowadays call literalists or fundamentalists. In his age, they didn't have the word fundamentalist. This is a Western Christian thing. But where the ulama are dismissing people of that disposition, they would call them hashwiyya, which is a bad word. Hashw means stuffing. In other words, people who outwardly have all of the forms, but inwardly, you might buy a really expensive sofa, but underneath is just straw and styrofoam or whatever. And some believers can be like that. So the ulama call them the hashwiyya. And even nowadays, the traditional ulama will sometimes refer to some of the extreme Salafis as hashwiyya, because they're just a recrudescence of this, the idea that the more we do and the more details we put into practice, and the more we take up our time by following the minutiae of the sunnah, the better we will be, until we become so wonderful that we can force other people to do the same thing. These are the people of stuffing. Okay, so he says that the lowest ulama are these hashwiyya, but the highest ones, samathiratul ulama, are the ones who understand this, that in giving religion to the people, through this process of interiorization and recognizing the centrality of the niyyah, the difficulty of controlling the niyyah, that you give people a basic grounding of religious motivations that enables them to have a love of religion and a sound niyyah, so that they're worshipping for the correct reason. And this is a subtle thing, and nowadays seems to be increasingly lost. Partly, I would say nowadays, because of the two-dimensional nature of the interface between the tradition and so many believers. If you're studying with a traditional sheikh, the sheikh will get to know you and will recognize when to press you hard and when to give you some space. But he can't do that if he's speaking to a TV camera and he doesn't know the circumstances of the sort of 10 million Egyptians who are watching. Instead, everything will be flattened out and he'll just give the rulings. Because the individual situation, the form of religion is appropriate to a particular soul with its particular weaknesses, is not something that he can appreciate any longer. So the whole move towards internet technology, satellite TVs and so forth, even printing to some extent, is a move away from the one-to-one wisdom transmission which begins with the Salaf, and a move towards a kind of flattened out academic, prescriptive, encyclopedic type of religion, which is often too much for people to carry. Okay, let's just close this chapter, because he has moved here. This is right at the end of the niyyah third of this book. Is talking about the enormous implications of the knowledge of the niyyah and its stubbornness, the difficulty of transforming it for people who are actually engaged in forms of public religion. فَكَذَلِكَ سُلُوكُ طَرِيقِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى كُلُّهُ قِتَالٌ مَعَ الشَّيْطَانِ. Following the path of Allah, all of it is a battle, swords drawn with the devil. وَمُعَالَجَةٌ لِلْقَلْبِ, and engaging with and treating the heart. وَالْبَصِيرِ الْمُوَفَّقِ يَقِفُ فِيهَا عَلَى لَطَائِفَ مِنَ الْجِيلِ يَسْتَبْعَدُهَا الضُّعَفَاء. And the man of insight who is given divine success is aware in this struggle of certain subtleties, min al-hiyal, not al-jil, min al-hiyal, certain subtle stratagems that the devil has, which weak scholars will consider to be unlikely, including, of course, the stratagem of weakening people through insisting on loading them with mountains of religious duties and hard sermons. فَلَا يَنْبَغِي لِلْمُرِيدِ أَنْ يُضْمِرَ إِنْكَارًا عَلَى مَا يَرَاهُ مِنْ شَيْخِهِ وَلَا لِلْمُتَعَلِّمِ أَنْ يَعْتَرِضَ عَلَى أُسْتَاذِهِ. So it's often not right for the murid, the disciple, to feel some kind of dislike or disagreement with something that he sees in his teacher, or for the pupil to object to something that his teacher is saying or doing. بَلْ يَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَقِفَ عِنْدَ حَدِّ بَصِيرَتِهِ, but should recognize his own limitations. وَمَا لَا يَفْهَمُهُ مِنْ أَحْوَالِهِمَا يُسَلِّمُهُ لَهُمَا إِلَىٰ أَنْ يَنْكَشِفَ لَهُ أَسْرَارُ ذَلِكَ, and who should accept what the teacher is doing, what the teacher is saying, until such a time as he himself becomes a great scholar and the secrets of this are revealed. بأن يبلغ رتبتهما وينال درجتهما ومن الله حسن التوفيق, and at that point he will understand and reach their degree, and success comes from Allah. And this is often an issue with uppity Westerners, often an issue with converts. When they study with a traditional teacher and the time for the duha prayer comes and the sheikh is just kind of drinking tea or whatever, and the self-righteous new convert who necessarily begins with outward things and moves to the inward, because this is our nature, thinks, well, I used to pray the duha prayer and Sheikh Fulan is not praying the duha prayer and this is really very disappointing. Or this sheikh has got a beard that's not shorter than my beard and doesn't, the sunnah, blah, blah. It's a common waswasa amongst Western Muslims who go into a traditional context whose wisdoms and forms have been shaped by maybe 1,000 years of the knowledge of the ego and this inner awareness of the beauty of the Sharia, and very often this self-righteousness can cause a kind of rebellion, and that happens sometimes inside born Muslim communities themselves. Somebody with a degree in dentistry sees that the mufti of his country's got just a tiny little beard, and so he thinks all of these fatwas are rubbish. And he looks about on the internet until he finds somebody with a longer beard and an angrier face, and he thinks this looks like ikhlas, and he follows all of those fatwas because he's got a dentistry degree. What does he know of these subtleties that the Imam is talking about? And this is a danger in our age. When we lose this wisdom to see that human value is something that it's difficult to discern externally, and that there are many wolves in sheep's clothing. When we lose that wisdom, that skepticism about our own capacity to judge, then the ummah becomes very Pharisaic, and things just become a kind of competition to do as much stuff as possible. And because it's only the outward thing that constitute religion, to become very divided and fanatical about things that are in their nature questions of ikhtilaf. But if the outward is all we have a tendency to idolize it and absolutize it, which results ultimately in, whole countries imploding because competing forms of fanatical self-righteousness simply cannot exist. It's only through this interiorizing of religion that religious Islamic communities can thrive and do what they are supposed to do, which is the cultivation of a contrite heart. So, alhamdulillah, we've reached the end of this section, and I always feel at these times that I have kind of offended against the Imam and his memory by not doing justice to it, because I've skated over the deeper and more difficult theoretical things, because a lot of this has to do with what nowadays we call philosophy of mind, which is one of the hardest things philosophers can do. Imam al-Ghazali is right in there. This is all very contemporary and relevant, and rahmatullahi alayhi, because he was writing this so long ago, and yet it all makes sense to us, doesn't it? Because human nature doesn't change. So inshallah, next time we'll be moving on to the question of ikhlas, the second third of this majestic book. Barakallahu fikum wal afu minkum, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we've completed our brief survey of Imam al-Ghazali's coverage of the complex and deep matter of niyyah, and we move on now to the very closely related topic of ikhlas, what we normally uncomfortably translate as sincerity. So this is what he calls this chapter, Al-Babu Thani fi al-Ikhlasi wa fadilatihi wa haqiqatihi wa darajatih. Chapter 2 on sincerity and its merit and its true nature and its degree. So there'll be three basic sections here. Why is it important? Is number one. How do we define it? Is number two. What are its internal degrees and differentiations? Number three. That's a very common Ghazalian way of opening up the subject. So the first of these, Fadilatul Ikhlas, the merit, the value, the point of Ikhlas. And it begins with the ayat. قال الله تعالى وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا الله مخلصين له الدين. They had been commanded only to worship Allah sincere in their religion for Him. وقال ألا لله الدين الخالص. Verily, to Allah belongs the pure religion. وقال تعالى إلا الذين تابوا وأصلحوا واعتصموا بالله وأخلصوا دينهم لله. Save those who repent and make amends and hold fast to Allah and make sincere their religion for him. وقال تعالى فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. So whoever hopes for the meeting of his Lord, let him perform righteous acts, and let him not associate in the worship of his Lord anything else. نزلت في من يعمل لله ويحب أن يحمد عليه. This is an addition in the hadith. It's a sound hadith narrated by Imam Hakim, who indicates the context of this hadith, this Quranic ayah. It came down specifically with regard to the person who is doing good deeds and hoping an yuhmada alayh, to be rewarded for it. So that's why you have the first half of the ayah, ikhlas, and the second half is وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا, and in partners no other with his Lord in worship. Because the absence or the opposite of sincerity is insincerity, is falsehood, is hypocrisy, which is what we defined as this multiple qibla syndrome, to have not just your Lord as your point of worship, but other priorities as well. وعن مصعب بن سعد عن أبيه قال ظن أبي أن له فضلا على من دونه من أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So one of the sons of one of the Sahaba is saying about his father, my father used to think that he had some merit above other companions of the Holy Prophet. فقال النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام, and the Holy Prophet told him, إنما نصر الله عز وجل هذه الأمة بضعفائها ودعوتهم وإخلاصهم وصلاتهم. So the Holy Prophet tells him, Allah the Almighty only gives victory and supports this ummah through its weak members and their prayers and their sincerity and their worship. And this is again part of the Islamic agenda, the Imam's agenda, in forcing us to abandon our outward judgment of things and external hierarchies and the appearances of things by looking at what's within. Just as the niyyah, which we can't see, determines the validity or otherwise of what we do, so also the sincerity with which we do things affects everything. And it is Allah's way that إِنَّمَا تُنْصَرُونَ بِضُعَفَائِكُمْ, you will be given victory only through the weak amongst you. رب أشعث أغبر ذي تمرين لا يعبأ به لو أقسم على الله لأبره. In another hadith, many a man who has wild hair and dusty clothes, nobody points him out. Were he to swear an oath by Allah, Allah would bring that to pass. This is part of, again, the real egalitarianism of religion, if you like, because the highest degrees can be attained by people who externally have no means at all at their disposal. Religion, in a sense, almost inverts the external order of things and says that فُقَرَاءُ أُمَّتِي يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةِ قَبْلَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ بِخَمْسِمِائَ عَامٍ, that the poor of this ummah shall enter paradise 500 years before the rich. It's not a universal rule because people have different darajat. It's quite possible for somebody to be wealthy and to have a high degree in terms of what he does with his wealth. But generally speaking, the more embedded we are in dunya, the harder it is for thoughts of akhirah to come naturally. And Allah is with al-munkasirati qulubuhum, those who are broken-hearted. وعن الحسن قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول الله تعالى الإخلاص سر من سري استودعته قلب من أحببت من عبادي. This is a saying or a hadith that comes through Al-Hasan al-Basri. Generally when Imam al-Ghazali says Al-Hasan, he meant Al-Hasan al-Basri, not Al-Hasan bin Ali. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, sincerity is one of my secrets. I place it in the heart of he whom I love amongst my servants. وقال علي بن أبي طالب كرم الله وجهه لا تهتموا لقلة العمل واهتموا للقبول فإن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لمعاذ بن جبل أخلص العمل يجزئك منه القليل. This is another quite radical sounding hadith. Ali bin Abi Talib is saying, do not be put out by the smallness of your righteous actions, but pay attention to whether they're accepted or not. Because the Holy Prophet ﷺ said to Mu'adh bin Jabal, be sincere in what you do, and only a little will be enough for you. Now, this doesn't mean that it's not a good thing to do more, but it is a way of pulling the rug from beneath our assumption that more is better. It might be, but not necessarily. Normally in the course of things, because good action, sound intentions, times of sincerity, times of openness with Allah are offered to us unpredictably, that the more we worship and the more decent things that we do, the more externally oriented we are towards the truth, tabaraka wa ta'ala, the more likely it is that one of those moments will come to us. If we pray only once in 20 years, well, maybe that'll be a great prayer, but probably not. So we need to frequently be in the mawatin al-ijaba, the places where the divine response is likely to be present. We can't guarantee qubul, we can't guarantee those moments of closeness, we can't guarantee that sense of the divine proximity and compassion and those highest points of ibadah, but the more we are in places where that can be expected to happen, they're mazinna, the more likely it is that we will get that. But the outer form itself is not the guarantor of it. But somebody who may only do the obligations, but with absolute sincerity and focusing in his every prayer, is likely to be a better Muslim than somebody is saying every conceivable prayer that he can find in the huge books of fiqh, but is kind of distracted, absent-minded, his mind wandering. It's a matter of common sense. So that's what this is saying. وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام ما من عبد يخلص العمل لله 40 يوما إلا ظهرت ينابيع الحكمة من قلبه على لسانه. He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, every servant who acts sincerely for Allah for 40 days shall find the well springs of wisdom rising from his heart and upon his tongue. So wisdom is one of the consequences of sincerity, and so on. And then he has a long section. Abu Yaqub al-Makfuf says, Al-Mukhlisu man yaktumu hasanatihi kama yaktumu sayyi'atih. It's a good way of looking at it. A sincere person who is somebody who conceals his good deeds as readily as he conceals his evil deeds. It comes naturally to us if we make a mistake or commit a sin or some kind of even innocent blunder that we kind of want to bury it and don't want other people to discover it. But a sincere person is somebody who has the same impulse when he does something good. وقال أبو سليمان الداراني طوبى لمن صخت له خطوة واحدة لا يريد بها إلا الله تعالى. Blessed is he who takes but a single step in which he only desires Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are many of these sayings which help us to put outward deeds in perspective. قال أيوب السختياني تخليص النيات على العمال أشد عليهم من جميع الأعمال. Getting one's inner disposition pure in acting is harder than all of the outward actions put together. So this looks like a relativizing of outward actions and seems to be an excuse for the ego that we think,
oh, I don't really need to do much more than the obligatory as long as I'm really focused and concentrated. But that's not the point, because that's actually a very hard state to be in. It's a much greater effort to purify the self and to conduct the bloody battle with the ego, which can take years and years and years, and in which you weep tears of blood because it's struggling with the self, that great paradox, the self overcoming itself, is actually harder than doing all of the outward actions. The outward actions themselves are just movements, activities, relationships in the material world. You could, I guess they now have these humanoid robots in Japan, that can make you a cup of tea and talk to you. You could train one of those to say 5 daily prayers according to whatever madhab you choose, and it would be perfect every time, but it's still not a prayer, still not a reality. And this is the point that our Imam is making. I don't know if that'll ever be a threat to employment in our community, if you have the Google car and other automated things, whether you could have a Google Imam who could just save the Wizarat al-Awqaf a lot of money by standing in the mihrab and always being on time for Fajr and never causing trouble and never thinking about politics. Well, maybe there'd be a lot of money to be made in creating such a person. But the point is, it wouldn't be a prayer. He has a lot to say about this matter of ikhlas. I just want to pick some of the pearls. قال بعضهم في إخلاص ساعة نجاة الأبد ولكن الإخلاص عزيز. If one is sincere for just 1 hour, one is saved for eternity, but sincerity is rare. And he's going to discuss this paradox of the human condition, our distractedness. We are mushattat, that the prayer, which is the imad ad-din, the most fundamental of our actions, the most indispensable, which is lidhikri, for the remembrance of Allah, is set up in such a way as to facilitate recollection. يسرنا القرآن للذكر. We have facilitated the Qur'an for recollection and recital. It's also the case for the prayer. It is the perfect, simple, iconic, archetypal form of human submission to the divine reality, and everything about it is there to make our inward ikhlas easier. The facing of the Qibla is a way of helping the human consciousness to concentrate and to move away from everything that's in every other direction. It's good psychology. The rules of tahara and purity are a good way of psychologically, as it were, washing away all of the unworthy thoughts and the lower thoughts and the things that we've been doing. It's good psychology. The adab of entering the masjid, the whole reverence that we apply to Allah's house, that's all there in order to facilitate our hudur, our attentiveness in prayer. And the Allahu Akbar with which we begin the prayer, and the movement of the hands behind us, which is, as it were, a kind of pushing away and behind us of everything that is not the divine. Allahu Akbar, again, should be helping us to pay attention, but still, immediately the whispering starts and we're somewhere else. Allah is making it easy for us, and we need to avail ourselves of that. And the ikhlas, a prayer in which you're actually attentive in every rak'ah, is a precious thing and a transformative thing. And that's where you start to see the meaning of Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. The prayer forbids corruption and unseemly things. But it means the reality of the prayer, not just what your cyborg from Tokyo could do, but the reality of the human submitted to his or her creator, actually submitted, the heart prostrating, as well as the outward form. that, if it's done from the Allahu Akbar to the Assalamu Alaikum, which is like the two shahadas, the first shahada about the divine transcendence and aseity, and the second shahada about relationality, sharia, messengership, human engagement. Assalamu Alaikum, Assalamu Alaikum. You re-engage with the human race at the end of the prayer. If between those times you're really on signal with the Qibla, that's going to transform you. If that becomes a regular habit, you will be a different human being. And that will be the community that does find that fahsha and munkar start to shrivel. And this is the heart of Islam. The heart of Muslim community is the mosque. And the essence of the mosque is the Quran and the prayer. And the essence of that is whether the heart is actually present. The center of everything in the Muslim community is the heart, the prostration of the heart, and the presence of the divine in the heart. And when that is present and we internally recognize what we've just said, Allahu Akbar, everything else assumes its due proportion. We become less anxious about it. We become more forgiving. We become more concerned for others. And that's why the reality of the end of it, the salam, will be how we are in society. And there will be no fahsha and no munkar among the Muslims, if only we get this right. It's sometimes said, all that you need to completely reform the ummah and solve all of its problems is to get them to pay attention when they're hearing the Fatiha. That's all you need. Never mind the world of Islamic banking and Islamic insurance and ideologies and this and that and all of the stuff that doesn't really seem to be making the world a renewed space. Instead, just look at what's in the Fatiha, the Sab' al-Mathani. If we can really be that, if in every mosque in the world people are experiencing that and actually hearing it, and sincerely, and then they act upon it, all the other problems will vanish. It's really not so difficult, but it's the ego that gets in the way, the distractedness, the lack of ikhlas, the multiple qiblas, alas. So I want to, because I've been holding forth a lot today, leave the rest of this description till next time, because we've reached a natural hiatus, and he will be talking in the next section about the haqiqat al-ikhlas, the true nature of sincerity. He's talked about why it's important and reminded us that the reality of religion is the bit of religion that we don't see in others, or probably in ourselves, that endlessly salutary lesson. He's now moving on to a definition. What is ikhlas? We might say, do we translate it as sincerity, or is it something a bit different? But we'll leave that until next time, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, al-Malik al-Haqq al-Mubin, Muhammadur Rasulullah, Sadiq al-Wa'd al-Amin. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik alayhi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. We've covered the Imam's treatment of the value, the merit, the purpose of ikhlas. And he now moves on to his next section, which is a bayan, one exposition on haqiqat al-ikhlas, the true nature of ikhlas, what it really is, which involves questions of definition and deeper understanding. اعلم أن كل شيء يتصور أن يشوبه غيره فإذا صفى عن شوبه وخلص عن سمي خالصا. It's like a grammatical, etymological explanation of ikhlas. So he's saying, know that everything which could be conceived to be mingled with and contaminated by something else, when it is pure of that contamination and safe from it, khalasa anhu, is called khalisan. This is the basis of the root. Ikhlas, mukhlis, khalis are to do with purity, in other words, undivided singularity. وَيُسَمَّى الْفِعْلُ الْمُصَفَّى الْمُخْلَصُ إِخْلَاصًا. And the action which is purified and set free is called ikhlas. It's called an action of ikhlas. قال الله تعالى من بين فرث ودم لبنا خالصا سائغا للشاربين. Between dung and blood he brings forth milk which is pure and tasty for those who drink. This is about one of his signs, one of his marvels. وإنما خلوص اللبن ألا يكون فيه شوب من الدم والفرث. So the purity of the milk is its being free of contamination by dung or blood. ومن كل ما يمكن أن يمتزج به, and from anything else that it could be mingled with. والإخلاص يضاده الإشراك. And the opposite of ikhlas is ishraq, in other words, to have some multiplicity associated within it or an impartnering to it. فَمَنْ لَيْسَ مُخْلِصًا فَهُوَ مُشْرِكٌ. Whoever is not mukhlis is mushrik. إِلَّا أَنَّ لِلشِّرْكِ دَرَجَاتٍ, even though shirk has different degrees. فَالْإِخْلَاصُ فِي التَّوْحِيدِ يُضَادُهُ التَّشْرِيكُ فِي الْإِلَهِيَّةِ. So ikhlas in tawheed has as its opposite to attribute partners to the divine in divinity. وَالشِّرْكُ مِنْهُ خَفِيٌّ وَمِنْهُ جَلِيٌّ. And shirk is hidden, but there is also manifest shirk. وَكَذَا الْإِخْلَاص. And ikhlas is the same. فَالْإِخْلَاصُ وَضِدُّهُ يَتَوَارَدَانِ عَلَى الْقَلْبِ. And sincerity and its opposite come over the heart in a way that is sort of in waves, as it were, that succeed one another. فَمَحَلُّهُ الْقَلْبِ. So its place, its locus is the heart. وَإِنَّمَا يَكُونُ ذَلِكَ فِي الْقُصُودِ وَالنِّيَّاتِ. And this just applies to intentions and purposes. وَقَدْ ذَكَرْنَا حَقِيقَةَ النِّيَّةِ وَأَنَّهَا تَرْجِعُ إِلَى إِجَابَةِ الْبَوَاعِثِ. We've already described the true nature of sincerity and that it is based on responding to deeper motives. فَمَهُمَا كَانَ الْبَاعِثُ وَاحِدًا عَلَى التَّجَرُّدِ سُمِّيَ الْفِعْلُ الصَّادِرُ عَنْهُ إِخْلَاصًا بِالْإِضَافَةِ إِلَى الْمَنْوِي. So to the extent that an emotion, that a motive or a factor is single and solitary, that action is called a sincere action with relation to whatever it is that is being intended. فَمَنْ تَصَدَّقَ وَغَرَضُهُ مَحْضُ الرِّيَاءِ فَهُوَ مُخْلِصٌ. So somebody who gives charity with the sole intention of ostentation and showing off is considered to be mukhlis, a sincere person. وَمَنْ كَانَ غَرَضُهُ مَحْضَ التَّقَرُّبِ إِلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فَهُوَ مُخْلِصٌ. And similarly, somebody who by the same act intends only to draw near to Allah is also called mukhlis. ولكن العادة جارية بتخصيص اسم الإخلاص بتجريد قصد التقرب إلى الله تعالى عن جميع الشوائب. But the convention in language is for the name of ikhlas to apply only to having a pure intention to draw close to Allah in a way that is free of all contaminants. So it's not usual to say that person is mukhlis if he's in a state of complete sort of idolatry. That's just not the way the word ikhlas is used. كما أن الإلحاد عبارة عن الميل لكن خصصته العادة بالميل عن الحق. Just as the word ilhad, which means unbelief, atheism, deviation, itself just means to lean. Normally in the language it refers specifically to leaning away from truth. ومن كان باعثه مجرد الرياء فهو معرض للهلاك. And whoever's intention is indeed just for ostentation, he is exposed to perdition. ولسنا نتكلم فيه. We're not going to speak about that.
إذ قد ذكرنا ما يتعلق في كتاب الرياء من ربع المهلكات, because we're already speaking about this elsewhere in the Ihya, in the quarter of mortal vices. He's not going to talk about this form of ikhlas, that is to say ostentation. وأقل أموره ما ورد في الخبر من أن المرائي يدعى يوم القيامة بأربع أسام. And we'll just mention the fact that it come in the hadith that the ostentatious person on the Day of Judgment will be summoned using 4 names. Ya Mura'i, you ostentatious person, you show off. Ya Mukhadi', O deceiver. Ya Mushrik, O polytheist. Ya Kafir, O unbeliever. وإنما نتكلم الآن في من انبعث لقصد التقرب. In this chapter we're only going to be talking about the person who intends drawing near to God. ولكن امتزج بهذا الباعث باعث آخر, but whose basic motivation of this kind is mingled with another motivation, إما من الرياء أو من غيره من حظوظ النفس, either ostentation or some other egotistic manifestation. ومثال ذلك, so we'll just read his examples of this before we close. We won't finish this bayan today, but I think it helps us to remember how timely or timeless these moral and spiritual exercises are when you consider this list of things that is giving of things that can be done that are ostensibly religious and can have a partly religious purpose, but can also have some other object as well. So, مثال ذلك, an example. أن يصوم لينتفع بالحمية الحاصلة بالصوم مع قصد التقرب. Somebody who fasts in order to benefit from a particular kind of medical condition or medical entailment, even though he also intends to draw near to Allah. Nowadays, people who think that, well, looking forward to Ramadan, maybe I'll lose a bit of weight. So the intention can be divided. أو يعتق عبدا ليتخلص من مؤنته وسوء خلقه, or somebody who frees a slave in order to have done with the expense of the slave and the slave's bad character. أو يحج ليصح مزاجه بحركة السفر, or somebody who makes hajj hoping that all of the walking and the exercise will be good for his health. أو ليتخلص من شر يعرض له في بلده, or he goes on the hajj in order to get away from some trouble back home. أو ليهرب عن عدو له في منزله, or to flee from an enemy that he has back home. أو يتبرم بأهله وولده أو بشغل هو فيه, or in order to get away from the hassle of his family and his children, or because of some preoccupation which he has. فأراد أن يستريح منه أياما, and he wants a few days off, so he goes on hajj. أو يغزو ليمارس الحرب, or somebody who joins the Ghazis for the holy war in order to learn the skills of war, ويتعلم أسبابه ويقدر به على تهيئة العساكر وجرها, and to learn how to be a soldier himself and how to direct armies and soldiers. أو يصلي بالليل وله غرض في دفع النعاس عن نفسه به ليراقب أهله أو رحله, or somebody who prays at night and his intention in that is to remain awake because he wants to guard his family or his riding beast. أو يتعلم العلم ليسهل عليه طلب ما يكفيه من المال, or somebody who seeks sacred knowledge in order to get a better career and income. أو ليكون عزيزا بين العشيرة, or to become respected amongst his peers. أو ليكون عقاره وماله محروسا بعز العلم عن الأطماع, or because the property of a scholar is generally considered to be safe from people who might want to confiscate it because of the prestige of the scholars. أو اشتغل بالدرس والوعظ ليتخلص عن قرب الصمت ويتفرج بلذة الحديث. Or somebody who busies himself with teaching and preaching because he's sick of just being silent, which he finds an affliction, and because he enjoys talking. أو تكفل بخدمة العلماء أو الصوفية لتكون حرمته وافرة عندهم وعند الناس. Or somebody who serves the scholars or the Sufis in order to gain status and respect from them and from the people. أو لينال به رفقا في الدنيا, or in order to acquire some companionship or ease in dunya. أو كتب مصحفا ليجود بالمواظبة على الكتابة خطا. Or somebody who writes out a whole Quran in order to improve his handwriting. أو حج ماشيا ليخفف عن نفسه الكراء. Or somebody who makes the Hajj on foot in order to save money. أو توضأ ليتنظف أو يتبرد, or makes wudu in order to clean himself or to feel cooler. أو اغتسل لتطيب رائحته, or takes ghusl in order to be less smelly. أو روى الحديث ليعرف بعلو الإسناد, or narrates hadith in order to have a reputation for having a high, that is to say a short isnad. أو اعتكف في المسجد ليخفف عليه كراء المسكن, or somebody who makes i'tikaf in the mosque so that he doesn't have to pay rent in a hotel or some nearby residence. أو صام ليخفف عن نفسه التردد في طبخ الطعام أو ليتفرغ لاشتغاله فلا يشغله الأكل عنها. Or somebody who fasts so that he doesn't have to bother to cook and can simply can have more time for his other affairs and not be distracted by meals. أو تصدق على السائل ليقطع إبرامه في سؤال عن نفسه. Or gives money to a beggar just to stop him hassling him. أو يعود مريضا ليعاد إذا مرض, or to visit the sick in the hope that he himself will be visited when he falls ill. أو يشيع جنازة لتشيع جنائزه أهله, or somebody who attends funerals in the hope that those people will attend the funerals of his own family. أو يفعل شيئا من ذلك ليعرف بالخير ويذكر به وينظر إليه بعين الصلاح والوقار. Or does any of these things in order to be known for goodness and mentioned as such and to be seen by the eyes of the people as a person of righteousness and dignity. So this is his list, and I think it's getting late. We'll deal with the Imam's explanation of what actually happens when you have multiple intentions and what happens to your ikhlas. And basically we'll see that the purpose of the righteous wayfarer is to reduce the number of intentions until you just have one intention, which is to please Allah. But within that intention there can be ways in which, as we saw in the case of the person who's sitting in the mosque, the intention is just to please Allah, but there are, as it were, sub-intentions. I can do that by making sure that people have the right adab in the mosque and that there are no thieves in the mosque and the other things. So it's going to be about ikhlas in the sense of purification, that is to say getting rid of inappropriate and contaminating strands or ingredients in your motivation for doing something good. بارك الله فيكم والعفو منكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن شاء الله.